In the realm of spirits, a war rages on. An army of monsters is advancing, countless in number. Their leader is a massive red-skinned demon with wings, fangs, enormous sharp horns, and silver hair. He soared into the air on his giant wings, his tail covered in spikes, and a menacing staff in his hand. The demon let out a threatening roar and proclaimed that no middle-rank spirits could touch him. Suddenly, from behind, he was attacked by a huge red-haired lion with blood-red markings on his muzzle. With lightning speed, the lion swooped down on the demon and, with his sharp fangs, bit into his arm with all his strength, tearing it off along with the wing. At the sight of their wounded leader, all the other monsters were horrified. No one had ever harmed him before. The lion was soon joined by an incredibly large bird, which soared up and struck the monsters with lightning. With just one flap of her wings, many demons were burned. Struck by the strongest blow, a huge white dragon appeared in the sky with a young man standing on its head, holding on to its horns. He was surprised because he had asked his partners to wait for him to appear first. The guy noticed that the demons were more desperate than usual because he was in the last dungeon, which meant that his role here had come to an end. Our hero realized that it was time to finish, so he thanked his friends and called for his weapons. He grabbed his huge glowing sword in his right hand and raised it to strike. The guy stood firmly on his dragon's head, applying special spells to his legs. He pushed violently against the mythical animal and headed down like a stone. The landing was so powerful that the entire ground bent under his feet. Our hero boldly looked at his opponents because his closest comrades in arms fought behind his back. After finally defeating the last of the remaining demons, the guy found himself in front of a huge door. The dragon told him that since the entire spirit realm was outside the threshold, no dungeons related to the demon realm should appear here. The guy suggested that it would be easier for him to go straight to the demon world and seal the entrance from there to ensure that no one would come abroad again. However, the dragon replied that divine beasts and spirits are different from humans. They are weakened by demonic energy, making it problematic for them to enter their realm. Only then did our hero realize that he could not go further. He thanked his friends, and at last, his long journey came to an end. The fairies were happily flying around. The guy spent his last 10 years in this world, so he remembered how it all began on a very ordinary day when nothing foreshadowed trouble. He suddenly disappeared from his world. The last thing he remembered was his beloved mother, who saw him off in the morning with a smile on her face. Soon it was his mother's birthday. He was then 25 years old. He was everything to her. Due to the invasion of the demon realm, this world was polluted, so they needed a person who would not be affected by magical energy. The guy was summoned, which made him very angry. However, after a huge amount of time spent in this world with his friends, the guy accepted it. Now it was time for friends to say goodbye. They were very grateful to the man for his help. Therefore, the dragon stretched its paw forward and summoned a magical object. He said that the human world could use the seed of the tree of peace. It was a worthy gift. The guy promised to raise it as soon as he returned, but for now, he hid it. He had been through many hard times and was often lonely. Now it was time to leave this place. The guy returned to his friends, waved to them with a smile on his face, and thanked them for everything. The huge, formidable lion sobbed in 3 streams because he had to say goodbye to his loved one. Our hero was embarrassed by such a reaction, so he asked the animal not to cry because a whole river could appear from his tears. Not only his friends were sad, the guy also did not know if he would be able to get used to a new life. Would a small restaurant be enough for him, where he would be a hero hiding his power? A green light appeared in the sky above our hero's head, which began to slowly descend towards him. Up to this point, he had been holding on well, but he still couldn't hold back his tears and hoped that all his friends would be happy. The green light descended lower and lower, slowly absorbing the guy until it disappeared completely. The great dragon raised its muzzle and touched the place where its friend had just stood for the last time. In the modern world, the warning of the rift sounded throughout the area so loudly that everyone could hear it. People were notified that a rift had appeared in the vicinity from which a demonic dragon of black flames was about to emerge, causing people to scatter in different directions. While running away from danger alone, military armored trucks arrived in the thick of things. A young man in an elegant suit with long hair tied in a ponytail raised his head and looked up at the sky. He ordered the nearest military personnel to contain the demon as much as possible until the rest of the military arrived because the rift was very large. The man raised his hand to the radio and commanded someone that his team was in position. All the military realized that this was one of the largest rifts they had ever seen. They were all in their places when it began to burst. Our hero appeared in the middle of the sky of Seoul with the words that the spatial teleporter was worse than the realm of consciousness. Only then did the guy look around and was surprised that the entire city below him was in ruins. Right in front of our hero was a huge rift that was about to burst, which happened literally a moment later. A huge green bloodthirsty monster appeared from it. But our hero was an unusual guy, so he gathered his power into a fist, intending to hit the monster. The guy was very surprised that he hadn't been able to collect even half of his usual mana amount. But even this strength was enough for him, so the hero fell on the head of the monster. A huge explosion rang out in the sky, which immediately attracted the attention of all people. The long-haired commander-in-chief turned in shock at the sound, trying to understand what had just happened. The hero was still in the sky and was amazed that his strength was enough to deal with the black flame dragon. Suddenly, some kind of notification appeared in front of the guy that there was a system error. The guardian god was trying to summon him to find out who he was. The hero was clearly surprised by this turn of events because this had not happened to him before. Our hero thought it was like someone trying to take him away again. He may have been weak before, but now he was a completely different person. The guy simply stretched his hand up and tore the mark off the celestial canvas. He clenched the magic writing in his palm with all his strength. This was enough to completely destroy it, and the hero himself could hurry home. The gathered people looked at the sky and couldn't understand why the black flame dragon and the rift had suddenly disappeared. Neither the military nor the commander-in-chief had ever heard of a rift simply disappearing before. Our hero was lying on the grass and trying to tell the world that he was going to die of hunger. Costa rolled on the ground from side to side and shouted that it was a real absurdity to starve the savior of the world. He replied that spirits do not need food or other life-sustaining substances. The guy tried to argue for a while, but realized that it was useless, so he jumped to his feet abruptly. He shouted that this was why he needed to stop doing it for the sake of his own survival. He couldn't survive on fruits and vegetables alone. The guy demanded meat, so he ran off to find it, leaving the great dragon alone. Casta's mother stood and listened to the fact that in a couple of months, the building would be demolished, so she needed to find a new place and prepare for eviction. The man tried to explain this to the woman, but she did not want to listen to him and turned away. He was very tired of these constant persuasions because this area is a zone of faults. It is very dangerous here. The compensation is very decent, so he was not interested in how anyone could refuse such a thing. The woman did not pay attention to his words and offered to eat something before leaving. She packed the container and said that she didn't care about money. Her son disappeared 10 years ago, so she must wait for him here. The man was amazed at what he heard and did not know what to answer, so he stood silently. He sat at the table and watched as the woman cooked food for him. The man said that the police should find her son, and the woman would not be able to do it on her own. These words made our hero's mother very angry. She turned to the visitor in anger. The sudden woman froze, opened her eyes in surprise, and could not say anything. It was at this very moment that the doors to her restaurant opened, and someone she had not seen for a very long time appeared in the open. Our hero returned home after a long journey and stood on the threshold with tears in his eyes. The woman was still shocked by what she saw. She couldn't say a word, only slowly backed away. Suddenly, her strength left her legs, and her mother slowly began to sink to the floor. After some time, evening came in the city. It got dark outside. The hostess went to the door of the restaurant and hung a sign that it was closed for today. At this time, our hero was sitting at the table and felt embarrassed and joyful. He was staring straight ahead and couldn't believe that his mum was here. The woman was very happy to return, but she could not hold back tears. She slowly stretched out her wrinkled hands to the young man and wrapped them around his palm. The guy was very happy with such a manifestation of feelings because he had not held his mother's hand for a very long time. As soon as he grew up, he tried not to do this because he was embarrassed. The hostess wrapped her hands around her son's face and could not understand whether she was dreaming or whether all this was happening in reality. Costa tried to explain to his mother that he himself did not fully understand where he had disappeared. Apparently, he was sucked into the rift when he woke up in this world. It took him a while to realize what he wanted. From behind the ruins, the guy lied to his mother because he was afraid that she would not believe that her adult son had gone to save the world in the realm of spirits. The woman could not stop crying, but these were tears of happiness. At that moment, she recalled the time when she walked the streets and handed out leaflets with photos of her missing child. They depicted a fairly adult guy who smiled sincerely. Every evening, the woman returned home and went into her son's empty room. At some point, she thought that he had run away from home on his own. Costa hugged his mother and calmed her down, saying that all the worst was over. With the help of his magic, the guy decided to check his mother's health. He was surprised that her endurance and energy were below average. Even processing does not give such an effect, which means that the woman is sick. Costa offered to go to the hospital to check on the health of his pale mother. However, she refused, and it seemed that she knew her body better than anyone else. In fact, the woman understood that her cancer cells had spread in her body. She went to the hospital too late. This news saddened her greatly. The woman wanted to know how much time she still had left to live. The doctor suggested about 6 months, so the owner did not want to spend the rest of her life in the hospital when her Costa finally returned home. Therefore, the woman smiled and shook her head from side to side, thus showing that she was fine. She was very happy to see her son, who was thought to be dead, so she offered to set a table for him. Costa realized that his mother was hiding something but decided not to torment her with questions yet. So he pretended to believe and went to his room. The guy calmly changed his clothes, sat down on the floor, and began to look around the room from all sides. He looked first at the ceiling, then at the wall, and at the dust that lay on his belongings. The young man realized that this place had also been empty for quite a long time. But the voice of his mother, who was calling for dinner, pulled him out of his thoughts. Costa went down to the first floor, and there were several plates with a very appetizing smell of food waiting for him on the table. The guy was amazed that his mother managed to cook all this so quickly. The woman was only happy with such words, so she also put her son's favorite meatloaf on the table. She admitted that she had been waiting for his return all the time because she did not know when the guy would return, so she cooked his favorite dish every day. The hero was very embarrassed by these words. They warmed his soul. The young man decided to remember old habits and took a piece of meatloaf in his hand. Then he began to carefully equip it with chopsticks and put more and more different food on it. After all, there was some rice, meat, spicy spices, and garlic on the leaf. Then our hero carefully rolled everything into the shape of a ball and put it in his mouth. The guy was delighted with the taste of homemade food, which he had not felt for many years. Costa ate food by the cheeks, and his mother was only happy with his appetite. Suddenly, the guy stopped for a second from the feeling that he was overwhelmed. He was so glad to stay at home in the company of his beloved mother that tears rolled down from his eyes. Our hero was extremely grateful to his mother. She only asked him to eat more slowly. The guy remembered that he was able to survive only because he thought about his mother, so he would not let the only person who supported him all the time suffer. The rest of the evening was spent on such nice conversations. At this time, somewhere else, a huge white wolf was asking his master why he had left the earth if he didn't have a reason to leave the place of the guardian god to him. However, he only replied that the brave hero who returned to his homeland would have to defend the land. The wolf was surprised that the fate of the entire planet was in the hands of an ordinary man named Costa. The owner continued to pass on information about the new protector to his animal, and he still did not cease to be surprised. At this time, it was late at night in our boy's city. Costa woke up, sat up on the bed straight, and yawned sweetly, scratching his head. The guy looked at his mother, who was lying next to him and sleeping soundly. The hero was amazed that the woman's pain was so strong that she winced even in her sleep. The guy realized that he had no time to lose. He needed to collect information as quickly as possible. Therefore, Costa got out of the house in the middle of the night and went in search of some information. The guy stopped after feeling the demonic energy of the summoned dungeon. He had a very bad feeling, but it couldn't be left so easily. Although the energy was quite weak, in the future, it might emerge as a creature, so he decided to reconnoiter the situation. He quietly got closer to the power source and saw a group of people with strange equipment. The guy was surprised that the Koreans had learned how to manage dungeons just 3 years after the Great Cataclysm. He speculated that this was why the demonic energy seemed so weak. Costa decided to find out everything anyway, so he pushed off the building with all his strength and flew past the people in suits with lightning speed. No one noticed, but one of them thought something had passed nearby. At this time, our hero was already on the other side of the magical gate. He found himself in an unknown place, and in the sky shone a huge magic circle, in the center of which there was something. The guy had never been here, but he immediately realized that he was in a summoning dungeon. Costa knew that ostrich hearts had healing properties, so he would not need additional materials to neutralize the demonic energy. The guy was also happy that he came up with an excellent dish for his mother. Our hero depicted a good plan, so he smiled bloodthirstily. He walked quietly among these strange animals, and the ostriches hid their heads on the ground out of fear. This allowed our hero to slowly look around. After a while, the guy reached a huge magic circle that was located on the ground. In the center of the summoning circle was a small pedestal on which lay a magical artifact. The guy concentrated his power in his hand, gathering it in the center of his palm. He then released all the energy and directed it precisely towards the magical artifact. There was a huge explosion, after which a crater remained in the ground. After destroying the magic energy, the guy was about to catch a few ostriches, but suddenly a system notification appeared in front of him again. It reported that a force was used that exceeded that allowed by the system. The guardian god tried to summon our hero to find out who he was, so a huge magic circle formed under the guy's feet. Castor was clearly not going anywhere, so he hit the seal with all his strength, destroying it. At this time, a huge white wolf was watching him, who was shocked by what was happening. He had been following the hero for some time, but he did not expect such a turn of events at all. Castor shouted to the invisible guard that if he wanted to see him, he should come to his house himself, but not now, but a little later, because now he had other things to do. The guy needed to collect the hearts of the ostriches as soon as possible before this dungeon disappeared. The animals clearly felt threatened when they noticed our hero, so they screamed in horror. They didn't stand a chance because our hero rushed past one of the birds with lightning speed, easily ripping the heart out of its chest. The guy held it in his hand and rejoiced at such a large catch. He thought it would be a great breakfast, so he put the heart in his hiding place. After all the business was over, it was time to return home. Castor pushed off the ground with all his might and headed back to the teleportation circle, landing in his world in the morning. He was too attached to this place to just leave. Suddenly, the hero felt that something strange was happening around him. He began to look around and noticed that space was distorted. Castor immediately thought that it was the same guard who had come to his soul, the words of a guardian who had already despaired and lost his essence. The wolf admitted that he changed his mind after seeing the karma of our main character. This is the ratio of bad to good things that people do throughout their lives. So, 3 years ago during the Great Cataclysm, the wolf felt a huge threat and gave all people a system similar to a game, so everyone could easily see their karma. The god himself never set limits for its assessment, but our hero still went beyond it. Based on his spiritual force, the result of this very karma seemed to the god that our hero would be quite suitable for the role of the next guardian. He looked at Castor and allowed him to ask some questions. The guy said he had a few, and the guard waited patiently. The guy began to just shout that the magician had gone crazy, trying to just give away the place of the guardian through inheritance. The huge white spirit was shocked by the strange man's unexpected reaction. The hero kept shouting that the work of the keeper was a complete swindle and deception. He looked the wolf in the eye and said with certainty that he was not going to do this. The keeper told him that it was too late to give up the job. These words led our hero into a slight stupor because he did not understand what was happening. Suddenly, a window appeared in front of him which said that the succession ceremony of the guardian of the planet was about to begin. But the hero did not want to become a guardian at all, so he tried to free himself. He summoned all his power to one place, trying to break the circle of inheritance. Even the wolf was amazed at how strong the energy was under the control of the common man. Castor did not understand why he was forced to go through the ceremony of succession without even explaining anything. He noticed something strange and realized that his wrist was in chains. Not only the wrist, but also all the other limbs were shrouded in magic chains. It was a complex chain magic circle, so the guy couldn't just break it with his magic power. The wolf did not understand the point of being so angry and wasting other people's time. However, the guy said that it was obvious to him that the guardian wolf would die soon. Therefore, he tried to make him a guardian himself without even asking for his opinion. The guy didn't believe that this was really what parents do when they protect people and watch over them. He asked the wolf to let him go and just send him back home. However, the keeper replied that he was obliged to find a receiver precisely because he protected people and watched them. After that, he would need a new guardian, and Castor could become one. The guy noticed that the status of a guardian made him immortal, so it was easier for him to stop and continue being a guardian himself. The wolf replied that he had been granted eternal life in exchange for the protection of the world. It was difficult for him to recover on Earth, where there were no more spirits or divine beasts because the planet and the guardian were one. Even if it was destined to cease to exist, the guardian could not just stand by and do nothing. After this explanation, Costa admitted that he was not going to be the successor of the keeper. He tried to summon his magical power again and free himself from his shackles. The guy said he didn't want someone like a wolf to rule his life again. This time he made even more effort. Costa decided to open the circle of movement. After that, his favorite huge sword flew into his hand from storage. The wolf was amazed that the guy had enough strength to use his magical abilities. At this time, our hero had already freed his limbs with the help of a magic sword. After that, he gathered his strength and delivered a lightning-fast series of powerful blows. In just a moment, all the seals and chains were broken. The hero was free from them. After that, the guy decided to defend himself, so he took the sword in both hands and put it in front of him. The wolf was furious that it was completely impossible to talk to this guy normally, to which Costa replied that it was impossible to talk normally with the wolf himself. The keeper said that the guy turned out to be exactly like all the other people he was so tired of. He only cared about himself, and if he did not see his own benefit in something, he turned a blind eye to it. To which the guy noted that for such a person who wants a normal life, this is a good compliment. Costa realized that he needed to calm down and think, because even though the keeper had become weaker, he was still strong. After that, the guy remembered that his friend had a dog, and when dealing with dogs, you can't fight them directly. Costa heard that dogs do not like to brush their teeth, so he climbed into the mouth of a huge wolf. Then he squeezed out a tube of mint paste for the animal and ordered him not to call on the powers of other people anymore. The wolf didn't want to give up quickly, so the guy had to get another tube of peppermint paste. Even so, the old keeper still didn't want to give up his position. Therefore, the guy remembered a conversation with his dragon, who did not want to become a guardian for anything in the world. Such confidence of an old acquaintance convinced the guy that he also never needed to become a keeper. Costa was distracted by these memories, so he did not notice the most important thing. At this time, the huge guardian wolf calmly freed himself and spat out the toothpaste from his mouth. He decided to use a different tactic in relation to this guy, so he asked Costa to become a guardian for the sake of his mother. He would be able to cure her illness with the help of divine power if he became a guardian. Since the guardian is responsible for the life of all creatures in his world, he is able to heal any diseases. These words made our hero stop and think carefully. He then looked at the guardian and asked him to save his mother. In return, he promised to do anything for him except become the new guardian. The wolf was surprised by this answer. It seemed to him that it was more logical to become a guardian himself and save his mother on his own. However, Costa replied that he did not know when he got used to his new abilities, so he asked for help from the current guardian. Therefore, with a glint in his eyes, he asked the wolf to take care of his mother first. The young man summoned the circle of movement again and pulled out his huge sword. With a single blow, he sliced through space and opened a passage to his world. The guardian was amazed at the strength of this hero because it is not so easy to cut through space. At this time, Costa was already joyfully running to his native restaurant, at the same time asking the wolf to reduce his size. The keeper did not fully understand why he listened to this guy, but he began to rapidly decrease in size. In the end, he turned into a rather cute little white dog. Costa was satisfied with the size of the dog, so he asked first of all to see the condition of his mother. The keeper already knew that the sleeping woman did not have much time to live. From one glance at her, the wolf immediately said that she had no more than 6 months left. The guy still refused to become the next guardian, so he thought about a plan of action. The cute dog sat next to him all this time and looked at him with a sad face. He then said that he no longer had divine powers, so he used his life energy to compensate for it. As it was too risky to use the remnants of life force without a good reason and receivers, the guy needed to come up with a solution to this problem. After that, Costa came up with the ingenious idea that life force is similar to endurance, so the dog just needs to eat something to help him restore energy. He agreed but warned immediately that he was not going to eat dog food. Our hero had already put on an apron and went to the kitchen to cook food. There were definitely creatures on Earth like beasts or spirits that possessed magical powers. They used to live freely, but the stupidity of the people led to their disappearance, and now it was their turn, and the whole world was in danger. At this time, our hero was calmly standing in the kitchen and thinking about what to cook, and the little wolf stood next to him and did not understand what this man was up to. After these words, the guy woke up from his stupor and drew attention to the fluffy animal in front of him. On the table lay the seed of the tree of peace, and the hero did not know what to do with it. Our man was surprised that the wolf immediately recognized this magical artifact. In fact, he hadn't thought that the guardian would only help restore such a magical object. It turned out that the guy did not understand the full value of this magic tree. Thanks to the wolf's words, he found out that the seed of the tree of peace cannot be obtained anywhere on earth. Castor was hungry at the very thought that this was really considered a rare delicacy. But the wolf was still interested in where such a strong thematic artifact came from in the hands of an ordinary person. After that, all the memories of the last 10 years immediately came to the guy's mind. But the first thing he decided to do was to get into his magical vault. Before, he had sometimes prepared a magic tree, but if we compare the preparation of it for consumption, it would be more effective to grow it first for restoration. Cultivating a tree of peace and saving lives with the help of a large world tree are the duties of a guardian. The wolf said that he had 6 months left, and that was not enough time to fully grow the tree of peace. After these words, the guy came up with a great idea, so he asked the wolf to leave the kitchen. The keepers were not used to being treated like this, so he was surprised by such an order. He didn't have the patience to wait, so the guy just threw the little dog out the kitchen door. The great wolf was dizzy after such a flight. He sat and slowly came to his senses. He just had time to think about everything that had happened, which was what the keeper was doing now. He pondered whether his master had made the right decision when he chose the hero who came from Earth. The wolf believed that he would never be able to believe in people after they had destroyed such a beautiful place through their own stupidity. At this time, in the kitchen, our hero turned on the gas and lit one of the burners on the stove. Then he began to fry something in a pan, even sticking out his tongue with zeal. The guy was glad that he still had not lost his cooking skills. He was done with the main part of the work. Now it was time to take on a special ingredient. These special ingredients were the heart of a magical ostrich from another world. The guy was having fun because if you ate this heart just like that, you could die. It took him a lot of effort to cut it in half with his sharp axe. The guy skillfully wielded a knife, and blood flew in all directions. After a while, he came out of the kitchen all stained with blood and called for the keeper. The wolf was clearly not happy with this appearance of our hero. However, this still did not prevent him from following him to the kitchen, where a beautiful portion of food was waiting for him, which was put in a dog's bowl and decorated with green peas on top. The great wolf was furious that he was dared to be offered dog food despite his appearance. The keeper immediately said that although the dish looked relatively normal, it was still the heart of an ostrich. He knew that it was all imbued with demonic energy and poison. However, the guy was not angry or upset because of these words. He assumed that the wolf would say this, so he called the keeper Belash, which again infuriated him. The guy bowed to the white dog and asked him to taste a freshly cooked dish. The guardian wolf looked at this man and did not understand what he was up to. He was sure that the guy would try to deceive him in some way, to save his mother. In any case, he needed the help of a person, so the wolf bent down and began to eat. After the first couple of bites, some strange feeling pierced through him. The great keeper realized that this food was insanely delicious. He didn't understand since when the heart of a magical beast became so delicious because he was sure that due to the poison and energy, it was inedible. Castor was happy and understood that it was all about how he spent the last 10 years. About 10 years ago, he had just entered the spirit realm. At that time, he was terribly emaciated, with bones peeking out from under the skin. He was talking to his deceased grandmother right in front of the river Styx. She came to the bank from the river and stretched out her flabby hands to him. The guy turned out to be so thin because there is no food in the spirit world. He ate only fruits for a whole month. The young man sincerely believed that in this way he would soon die of hunger. He was having a dialogue with his grandmother when he noticed something strange. Suddenly, she became huge, her eyes shining with rage because someone dared to starve her grandson. She ordered the young man to get up and promised to help him. This is approximately how our hero explained his cooking abilities to the great guardian. Despite the obvious delirium of the story, the wolf's life force began to recover. The guy promised that he would cook for the keeper as much as he wanted as long as he did not need to treat his mother and protect anything. The wolf was glad that they had agreed on at least something. The keeper liked the dish so much that he asked our hero to give him more, and the guy was only glad that someone liked his cooking. Therefore, he called the wolf Bellows and gently stroked his head with his finger. A global company that is now at the top of the Korean economy and has a high status all over the world. In front of us sits the second son of the executive director, Sergei. Now he is once again faced with a difficult situation. At this time, in the restaurant of our hero, He woke up his mother and called her to breakfast. The woman woke up and saw a cute white dog in front of her who was cheerfully wagging his tail. She looked down at her leg and saw that it was covered in dog saliva. A couple of seconds after that, the dog approached the woman and began to lick her leg further. After a while, the woman, dressed in homemade clothes, went down to the kitchen. The dog was sitting under the table and eating from a bowl. The woman was surprised that a dog appeared because her son used to be afraid of animals. But the guy replied that the dog would not hurt them and was there to guard the house. The woman was upset. She realized that they were living in a very dangerous time. But the guy distracted her from these sad thoughts because he had prepared a wonderful breakfast for her. In front of her were several plates, each full of delicious food. The woman was amazed that her son had personally prepared all this for her. She also immediately noticed that the guy began to cook much better than he did before. The woman took the chopsticks in her hand, then carefully grabbed a piece of food from the plate. After that, she slowly put it in her mouth and began to enjoy the taste of homemade food. She was lucky because she had not yet seen the mess that was going on at the car wash. Our hero just remembered about it and realized that he needed to clean up as soon as possible. The woman was so happy to have her son back that she could now entrust him with her restaurant and relax. She was glad that his mother could now live in peace. At this time, the keeper called him from under the table and asked for more. He said that he had done a good job and that the woman should no longer be in pain. After all, he licked her leg all night and thus cured her of the disease. The mother just remembered about the new member of the family and decided to pat him on the head. The woman asked her son if the dog needed dog food, which horrified the keeper. Costa promised to come back later for groceries to look for food for the dog as well. At this time, in the corporation, Sergi was sitting with a sad face in an armchair. Then the door to his office opened, and a young girl in a strict black suit entered. She said that she was unable to complete his task and find out the cause of the incident. The whole team was still investigating, but it was already clear that the CCTV system had not stopped working. Even the workers who were then at the scene said that everything happened just like that for no reason. The girl listened very carefully to the testimony of each of them. Such a report to his subordinate clearly did not suit the young boss Sergi. The guy lowered his head to his chest and asked the girl if there would be any consequences this time. To which she replied that he would be called either the diamond spoon or the mediocrity of the family most likely. But the guy thought the girl was mocking him and did not answer seriously. At the moment, he wished he didn't have a nickname at all, not even more horrible ones. He had spent 500 million won on this dungeon, so now he was worried about the failure. After a while, Sergi calmed down and asked the girl if his father and older sister were aware of what had happened. And after receiving a negative answer, he was glad that this was at least one good news. He admitted that he was too excited at first, although he was awake. Mediocrity would always remain mediocre. The girl was unpleasant and sad to hear such words from her boss. After that, the secretary Diana said that the chairman hates people who say something like that. The girl added that Sergi is the only one who is making efforts to resume going underground, and even if he decides to stay, then let him find a more appropriate reason for this. These words touched Sergi. He was glad that Diana was alone on his side. The guy was looking through the list of the composition of the dungeon hike and asked what happened to the first group, which was mobilized 6 hours after the incident. To which the girl replied that this group was still nearby. They are resting after studying the scheme of the dungeon hike. Nothing has leaked to the press yet, and she has already sent the recordings from the CCTV cameras to Sergi's tablet. The guy just found this data and decided to look through it carefully. He chose one video that was supposed to be the first, judging by the time. The young man hesitated a little at first, but then gathered his thoughts and pressed the start of playback. Sergi and Diana watched the recordings together. At first, nothing special happened. However, after a while, something on the recording. 1 in tens of billions, absolutely none of those present were delighted with the outcome of events. After that, Sergi noticed it was already late in the evening, so he thanked everyone who participated in such a long meeting. The next time they were supposed to gather was when the preparation for the trial and the materials for it were ready. For today, everyone was free to go home. Sergi had spent several days at work, so when he went out into the bright sun, his eyes watered. Diana and her boss walked slowly down the street, discussing the weather. The young man was upset that everyone was suffering because of him. He was very ashamed that he had kept his secretary waiting for more than 18 hours. To which the girl replied, "Don't worry, boss. I'm ready to follow you anywhere, just don't make it a marathon next time." These small words of support inspired Sergi very much. Some short time after the start of the walk, the young people stopped in the middle of the road. Sergi admitted that he still had at least one very good side in his office. Immediately afterward, the thought of his father and older sister looking down on him came to mind. Their success put a lot of pressure on him from a moral point of view almost from birth. Before these thoughts, the young man again fell into a stupor and did not move for some time. He woke up only when his secretary called out to him, standing in the middle of the road. The girl decided to cheer up her boss and offered to have a snack somewhere before returning. Sergi tried to refuse such an offer because he was embarrassed, to which Diana noticed. "Boss, you always scratch your forehead when you're nervous. Also, you always go to bed to relieve stress. Maybe you should try yoga instead?" Sergi was surprised at how well his secretary knew him, so he agreed to have a snack. The girl knew a good place nearby, so the young people got into the car. The secretary was driving and took her boss to a small restaurant with very tasty food. She looked around and wondered if all the buildings were destroyed because of what they found in the area. After some time of the trip, when Sergi had already begun to fall asleep, Diana said they had arrived. Of course, it turned out to be our protagonist's family restaurant, which was hosting customers for the first time since he returned. Diana asked for a table for two while the boss looked around. The girl was carefully examining the menu, and Costa thought he had come across very interesting visitors. Suddenly, the voice of the keeper rang out in his head, offering to show the guy the visitor status windows. The young man did not really like the fact that he spoke to him using telepathy. However, he agreed to look at the visitor status windows anyway. He saw that Diana was 30 years old and a kind swordsman of level 34. Sergi, on the other hand, was 32 years old and a rare kind magic archer of level 25. Immediately after that, Costa realized that his intuition had not failed him, but he still did not understand why people like them would come here. The voice of the guardian in his head said that people like them are called awakened. The guy was angry that the wolf could even read his mind, but he said that he was just too predictable. 3 years ago, after the great capitalism, magical power or particular classes began to awaken in some people, just like in a game. Costa thought that the awakened could give hope to people after the invasion of demons. At this time, he was thinking about this topic and observing his unusual visitors. He mentally asked the keeper how strong these people were right now, to which he replied that they are among the 10% strongest among all people and in the 30% among hunters. After this information, Costa decided that it would be difficult for them to resist even a mid-ranked demon monster. Diana wanted to place an order, but was surprised that there was only one dish on the menu. The girl was not only surprised by the quantity, but also by its price. Costa also saw the price on the menu for the first time, which had doubled over the past 10 years. The guy thought it was too expensive, but the girl said it was too cheap for the modern world. Sergi noted that the restaurant would go bankrupt if it sold food at such a low price. Hearing such words, the mother of our hero came out of the kitchen into the restaurant hall. The guy was very surprised that the prices of all goods had soared so much, which surprised everyone in the room. The woman replied that she had been working for the last 10 years not for the sake of earnings, but so that her son would have a place to return to. With her heartbreaking story, the woman surprised the unusual visitors of the restaurant. Despite everything that had happened, Diana noticed that the kitchen smelled very delicious. Sergi also liked the smell, so he asked to cook a very spicy dish and bring booze. The girl refused to drink with him because there was no spare driver. At this time, Costa was in a stupor because of how quickly events were unfolding. But his mother called him from the kitchen and asked him to help, so the guy had to force himself to move. Costa approached his mother and asked if they were selling their food too cheaply, but the woman did not listen to him at all. She was only glad that there were visitors for the first time in a long time. She came up with a brilliant idea, which she immediately voiced to her son. Since these were the first visitors since the guy returned, the woman offered him to cook his own food. The guy was a little shocked by what was happening, but his grandmother wished him good luck in his thoughts. At this time, at the other end of the city, something strange was happening at an abandoned construction site. A man smiled bloodthirstily as his victims begged him to spare them. He said they didn't have to make some kind of crazy out of him, just answer one question. He wondered which of these two connected people loved the other more. None of them could say a word, they just bowed in silence. The guy was very amused by this reaction of the couple. He looked down at them, then straightened his jacket and grinned. The guy admitted that there is nothing to hide in the absence of love. Therefore, he decided to choose his first victim at random. It turned out to be a guy. At this time, strange customers were still dining in our hero's restaurant. Costa put his hands out in front of him and very persistently refused something. At this time, Sergi argued with him and, on the contrary, very persistently offered to take something. It turned out to be a check for 5 million won signed by him, which was just a huge amount. Costa was shocked that he had never seen so much money before. Sergi continued to persuade the guy to take the money, but he refused, referring to his conscience. However, the unusual guest continued to insist that it was not only a payment for food, but also for the time spent. For a person like him who can't even eat normally because of work, the guy had tears in his eyes, and he said that perhaps today was the last meal. It may have been the last cooked meal that even his father couldn't give him before he died. In addition, the combined dish that the chef prepared was very tasty. These words spoken to the visitors pierced our hero to the very heart. Costa even took Sergi by the hand because of how pleasant it was for him to hear such praise. After these words, he gladly accepted the money, although it was still too large an amount. After that, the young man escorted the dear guests outside the threshold of the institution and said goodbye to them. He was immensely happy that his food was praised and also that he earned money. At this time, the curtain was pulled back and the mother of our hero came out of the kitchen. The guy immediately ran closer to her and showed her the check that the visitors had left him. The woman wanted to praise her son for making some money, but something caught her attention. At the sight of the sum of 5 million won, her eyes literally fell out of their sockets. The woman was amazed that her son was able to bring such a large amount. The guy said that they bought a food subscription. They really liked it, so they are going to come here all the time. So they paid the whole amount at once, and they will have to serve them in the future when they come. The woman was so shocked that she believed in this fake story. She returned her eyes to their place, and Costa regretted that he continued to lie to his mother. The woman was still happy with this money because they just had to pay for the institute. Our hero did not even immediately understand what institute she was talking about, so he asked his mother again. The woman explained that she would need to inform about his return, buy basic necessities, and change clothes to new ones. The guy decided not to add problems to his mother, so he went to the law enforcement center himself. Since people now disappear quite often, the procedure for restoring the status is not so long. While Costa was thinking about this, he came across an employee of the center who offered his help. The man looked through the documents and said that he had already collected everything he needed. He just needed to scan them. While he was telling this, the guy listened attentively, but something attracted his attention. The worker had a bracelet with a magic stone on his left wrist. The man said that everything was in order with the documents, and Costa looked quite young for his 35 years. After that, he asked the young man if he had ever used magical engineering procedures, to which he received a negative answer. Costa justified himself by saying that he had lived in the mountains for a long time, so he had not heard anything about them. The worker explained that magical engineering fully lives up to its name. It is a new science that combines magic and the powers of magic stones. As an example, he showed off his bracelet, which was made with it. However, this bracelet is not an artifact, although it is very similar. Only the awakened who are able to control magical powers can use artifacts. But things made with the help of magical engineering can be used by those who are not able to control it. Therefore, these bracelets can be called a simple imitation of artifacts. After that, the employee said that such items could be bought at the hunter's market. However, he did not have time to warn Costa. He could be deceived there, and he had already rushed away. After a while, the guy walked happily after purchasing a mobile phone, but it turned out to be a deception. The guy hoped it was a bargain. He was completely unaware of the current prices. Although he still had a whole 1 million won left, he could go and buy his mother an artifact for protection. The guy walked around the city and tried to remember what the clerk had told him about the magical objects. After some time, Koshia reached the hunter's market where you could buy them. He held small stones in his hand and was amazed that such a crumb was worth as much as 3 million won, even though they were lying everywhere in the dungeons of the spirit realm. He asked the seller if there was anything cheaper, to which he replied that they had the lowest prices in the area. After that, Koshia said that he needed protection from a human or from a mid-rank demon monster. The seller noticed that a few million won would not be enough to protect against a mid-rank demon monster. It would require at least a few 100 million won. The guy was amazed that there was so much trash that could be found just by walking around the spirit realm. Suddenly, the voice of the guardian rang out in his head. calling out to him very insistently. The wolf was still angry with his new nickname, Balash, which our hero had awarded him. Despite this, the keeper still warned Koshia that a looter had broken into their restaurant. The seller was surprised that such a young guy did not manage to share something with the looters. After all, the marauders are the awakened who have lost their way over time. But before he could finish speaking, the young guy who had just stood in front of him disappeared. The man didn't even have time to notice when he evaporated because just a moment ago, he was still standing right in front of him. At this time, Costa was already rushing home as fast as he could to protect his mother from danger. The young man tried to run as fast as possible, afraid that he might not have time. He had just returned home, just reunited with his family. How could he have lost it the very next day? At this time, the villain who had only recently killed the couple was holding a red candy in his hands. He opened his mouth wide, then placed the ball on his tongue and swallowed it without chewing. He then licked his fingers, which still held the taste of the candy. Then he arched, stretched slowly, and stretched his back and stiff joints. He smirked at some thought that had just crossed his mind. After that, he began to laugh under his breath and walked cheerfully away from the scene of the murder, closer to the city center. The guy was clearly in a good mood. He was singing and dancing, carrying something in a black bag. The mother of the main character was cleaning up the kitchen when someone entered the restaurant. The woman first thought it was her son who had come, so she was surprised when she saw another man on the doorstep. He was also surprised that he was called by a different name. In fact, his name was Misha. The guy calmly entered the restaurant and was amazed that only one dish was served there. But the woman's attention was more attracted by the fact that he came here with a suspicious package in his hands. The guy didn't care at all. He only asked if the restaurant specialized in this one dish. After that, he calmly approached the table, pushed back the chair, and sat down on it, throwing the black package right on the floor next to him. Something in this package haunted the woman, the smell or color of it. At one glance at this package, from which hair protruded, the woman fell into a stupor and could not move. Mike immediately realized that the woman had noticed what he had in the bag, so he said that if the food in this restaurant was delicious, then he would kill her painlessly. And if he didn't like the food, then the mother of the main character would end up the same way as these unfortunates. The woman immediately went to the kitchen to cook. The looter continued to smile and sat calmly at the table, throwing his legs over his legs. The keeper immediately sensed that this man was clearly a looter, so he was very angry. He looked at Mike and used his ability to see the window of his skills. The guy was 29 years old, belonged to the class of ordinary assassins, was evil, and had level 33. Judging by Misha's karma points, he didn't really try to hide. This was not the guy who should have climbed without using divine punishment. At this moment, the marauder also noticed the puppy, so he decided to play with him and called him to him. He didn't even have time to do anything when the door to the restaurant suddenly opened with force. At this time, Misha's attention was distracted by the keeper, who lay on his back and pretended to be cute. Therefore, when our hero appeared on the threshold of the restaurant, the looter perceived him only as a noisy snot. He continued to call the dog, but the dog turned his back on him. Moreover, he demonstratively and without turning around walked in the opposite direction, closer to Costa, who had entered. Only after that did the looter pay attention to the one who entered the restaurant. All his clothes were covered with the blood of the people he had killed before, and from the black bag next to the chair, evidence of his atrocities peeked out. The hero silently and with a menacing look approached the marauder, mentally clarifying with the keeper where his mother was. He also asked the wolf if he could erase people's memories, calling him by his real name for the first time. After that, the guardian realized that the guy was very serious about the invader. After that, Costa decided not to hold back anymore and released a huge stream of mana around him. It was so strong that many objects began to rise into the air. The young man said only one word, but he put into it a firm intention to kick the looter out of this restaurant and protect his mother. A moment after that, Mike was pulled out of the room with such incredible force that he slammed into the wall of the house standing in front of him. He was hit on the surface so hard that the guy instantly lost consciousness. With such a punch force, it wouldn't be surprising if most of his bones were broken, but Costa was clearly not going to stop there. Mike came to his senses and tried to find out from the guy who attacked him why he suddenly did this. However, our hero replied that such finished people as he should be silent. After that, Costa again used his power and squeezed the marauder from a distance. The young guy had already left the restaurant and even summoned his sword, intending to finish what he had started. At that moment, the voice of the guardian rang out in his head, warning that he would become a murderer. Still, the hero did not lower his weapon but froze in place and listened. The keeper continued to say that the looter was not the kind of person for whom you could throw away all your former efforts. This speech brought our hero to his senses. He began to calm down little by little. The guy realized that if he went even further, he would definitely become a murderer, and he couldn't let all that time turn to dust. Therefore, Costa hid his weapon, then approached the marauder and listened to him begging for mercy. The keeper mentally reminded him that if he left this guy just like that, he would definitely die. Therefore, Costa summoned a magic stone from the vault and slowly headed towards Misha. Then he leaned over to the guy, grabbed him by the hood, and lifted him off the ground. He ordered the looter to open his mouth and take medication if he wanted to live, which he did. The medicine turned out to be so disgusting to him that Misha almost died a second time from its taste and pain. In fact, it was a medicine that could restore absolutely everything in the body. Despite the taste and pain, it worked perfectly because Koshia had already used it himself before. After that, the looter was tied all over his body and taken directly to the nearest police station. At this time, our guy was preparing further, reasoning that it would be difficult to go straight to the dungeon right now. He needed to focus on rebuilding his stamina or making money in peace. After that, the guy stirred his soup, took some in a ladle, and brought it to his mouth to take a sample. The food tasted delicious, so he could set the table and call his mother to breakfast. At this time, the police station had already managed to deal with the looter who was lying in front of their doorstep. The policewoman was angry because of something early in the morning. The candy case brought in even more bodies instead of moving forward in the investigation. Her colleague approached the woman and tried to invite her to lunch, but she was clearly not in the mood for eating. The guy noticed that if she did not eat, she would not be able to work normally because in order to take good care of others, you first need to take care of yourself. The woman was infuriated that a colleague who was younger than her was lecturing her. Her phone rang, so the girl picked up the receiver and introduced herself as the leader of the first squad of the Department for Looters, Tatiana. It was reported that Misha had been caught, so Tanya and her colleague went to the scene. They looked at a report on the suspect's movements. According to the information department, there were about 10 victims. Judging by the video that was sent to them, Misha definitely ate sweets. After the news, Tatiana lit a cigarette to get rid of the accumulated stress. She was pleased that she managed to detain the culprit in 10 incidents. But Misha was not the only suspect in this case. These candies are actually an artificial enhancer. The woman said that she was not going to break for food until she got to the bottom of the truth because it was more important to find out where these sweets were obtained. Immediately after this phrase, an awkward silence followed. In the silence, the younger colleague's stomach rumbled very loudly. To Tatiana's menacing look, the guy replied, "Hey, I can't do anything about my hunger. I wouldn't refuse snacks, so I looked around hoping to find some place with food nearby." Nearby was a small restaurant of our hero and his mother. Therefore, the guy persuaded his senior colleague to go and have lunch there, at the same time figuring out the information. Based on what the employees of the institution saw and heard, the guy and the girl went to the restaurant where they were met by Costa with a smile on his face. The couple entered the establishment just as the hero was cleaning. They, like all previous visitors, were surprised that there was only one dish on the menu, so they ordered 2 portions, sat down at the table, and continued to talk about their own matters. Tatiana was clearly dissatisfied with the situation. Instead of investigating, they were spending time sitting in a restaurant. Great, she thought. Now we can talk to at least 10 victims over soup. If they did not reveal this body, they would face defective things, the owners of which would lose control of themselves. That's what the press says, and a large corporation is bound to take advantage of it to make a fuss. The guy only finished off Tatiana by saying that the boss would be very angry with her. It didn't matter because all they could do was investigate and collect information about the incidents. All the victims had nothing in common at all. They even tested newly formed religions. They also did a lot of work in analyzing the composition of these candies. In addition, the guy noticed that the identification department would ignore all calls after the end of the working day and on weekends. Therefore, work is good and important, but you should not overdo it, he said, trying to cheer up his boss. The guy promised to follow her if she was kicked out. At this time, an equally important conversation took place in the kitchen. The keeper told Costa such important information that it took the guy time to perceive it. Because of the visitors, they had to communicate only mentally. It turned out that all this time, the wolf was at the first level. In order to move to the next level, it was necessary to successfully complete the quest to fulfill Tatiana's wish so that the boss would not punish her. Costa immediately guessed that Tatiana was the same woman who was now sitting in their restaurant and waiting for her order. However, he did not understand at all how he could make sure that her boss did not punish her. The wolf continued to talk about the fact that the power of the guardian directly depends on the faith of a person. It changes when something bad happens or a desire appears, but if this request is granted, then the divine power of the guardian grows. Costa correctly noted that using strength for this is the same as pouring into a bottomless pit, so the wolf decided to ask the guy if he really understood what he had just said. The guardian reminded the hero that he must complete this quest if he wants his mother to recover faster. Costa could not even think of how he would be able to solve the problem of people he saw for the first time in his life. He brought the order to his visitors, interrupting their conversation for a while. The guests really liked the appearance of their food, but the guy still did not stop worrying about the task hanging over him. He tried to think of some excuse to talk to his guests. Therefore, he offered to bring them some radish kimchi, which the owner of the restaurant had prepared in winter. Tatiana wanted to refuse, but her colleague said that beef soup must be eaten with radish kimchi. Usually, she does not like such an appetizer, but the rest of the food in this restaurant was really good, he said. So the woman decided to try it anyway. She thought about eating them together. It would be the right thing to do. This thought led her to believe that looters always use candy along with artifacts. This was something new in the investigation, so Tatiana could not wait a minute. The woman got up from the table, left her food, and ran away in an unknown direction, allowing her subordinate to eat her portion too. The guy was surprised by such strange behavior from his boss, but decided not to pay attention and asked for a third portion of soup. He told our hero that as soon as his boss came up with an idea, she rushed to check it no matter what. It means that the quest to fulfill the wish had been completed, he said with a grin. A few years ago, a young guy was sitting on the ground with his hands around his briefcase. Right in front of him, some girl threw another guy over her shoulder. She did this because they bullied weaker students. The beautiful girl told the hooligans not to even try to say anything bad about the shelter or about herself. After that, she straightened her clothes and was about to leave. At the last moment, the guy with the briefcase called her by the name Dasha. He offered the girl to eat rice cakes with him, which he was quite good at making. These were memories from the childhood of our hero, who was surprised that his mother was still communicating with Dasha after so many years. To this woman, she replied that she was just a lonely child in this dangerous world. Thanks to mutual support, it was a little easier for both of them. Therefore, today the woman wanted to meet her young friend together. The mother of our hero was heading to the exit and asked him to cook dinner for the last time. Then the woman left the restaurant and slammed the door behind her, leaving the guy alone with the wolf. He knew right away that she was going to the hospital, but he wanted to keep it a secret from him. The hero wanted to thank his childhood friend Dasha for her mother's help, so he called Balash for a walk for groceries. At this time in the city, a young girl with fiery hair greeted her old acquaintance, whom she called Mother. She apologized for being late due to being kept in the Hunters Association. After that, the woman and the girl took each other by the arm and went to the hospital. At the doctor's appointment, he looked a little discouraged. It turned out that the mother of our hero had become much better. Her condition had improved markedly. The tumor had greatly decreased. The doctor said it doesn't happen often, but it's definitely a good sign. The woman burst into tears from the feelings that overwhelmed her at that moment. She was very grateful that the illness was receding and that she was able to spend more time with her son after a long time. The owner of the restaurant admitted to herself that she wanted to live again. At this time, our hero went instead of a store to the nearest beach. There, he built a kind of fishing rod, tying some strange fish to an ordinary rope. So he decided to take revenge on this fish for trying to kill him and now made bait out of it. Costa took the rope in his hand and began to twist it around him with all his strength. At some point, he caught a good position, applied additional force, and threw the bait into the water. At the same time, it flew so far that it was impossible to see the place of the fall from the shore. Costa decided that this sea looked like this because of demonic monsters, which means that there must be someone like the kraken or more interesting. The guy complained that ordinary freshwater fish is now used for fish cakes, and it is important for him that the taste reminds of the sea. The wolf most likely did not know, but the kraken is very tasty, although its head and bones contain poison, so you can't eat a lot of them. While our hero was telling the keeper about the various ways to cook kraken meat, His improvised fishing rod began to twitch. At the other end of the rope was something huge, but it was imbued with magical power, so you couldn't just break it. At that moment, a fight began between the monster and the fisherman, who was stronger. Caster held the rope with all his might, rested his feet on the ground, trying not to let the monster fall off. Gradually, he began to pull the rope towards himself, and something gigantic appeared in the distance. The wolf was once again amazed that his master had chosen an obviously not ordinary person as the next guardian. At this time, next to him, a battle was taking place, not for life but to the death. With one last strong jerk, Caster pulled the real monster ashore, which was several hundred times larger than himself, which once again confirmed the fears of his guardian. Soup broth began to boil on the stove, and meat frying sizzled in the pan. It was Caster who returned from fishing and began to cook fish cakes from the kraken, which he had caught recently. At this time, Dasha and the mother of our hero were returning from the hospital and were standing in a traffic jam, which usually should not be in this place. The girl was very hungry, so she asked the hostess what would be served for lunch today. The woman looked at her adopted daughter and pondered, remembering what they had. She remembered that Dasha was very fond of rice cakes, which were often cooked by her son Costa. The lady offered to cook them, but the girl, in response, suggested that it would be better to go somewhere else and eat stew. In the middle of their conversation, a bright red light suddenly appeared from afar, illuminating the entire sky. Both women paid attention to it, and Dasha suggested that it could be waves from the rift. The owner of the restaurant immediately began to worry about the girl because it meant that it was time for her to run. In reality, Dasha was an official member of the Korean team that works with the S-rank awakened people. They called her the Crimson Witch, the Witch of Flames, or the Destroyer. However, the girl herself thought for a moment and told her mother that she was not going anywhere. She noted that the rift had not yet appeared, but it should happen soon, and the government should have already sent competent people to a rift of this level. She herself had a day off today. Moreover, the girl was worried about the fact that her mother could not drive a car. She would have problems if she stayed here. But the hostess reminded her that she herself knows perfectly well how easily a person can simply disappear one day, hinting at her son Costa. Therefore, Dasha decided that she would stay in the car and stick with the woman. It was at this moment that the mother of our hero decided that it was necessary to inform the girl about the return of her son Costa. At first, Dasha did not even understand what she meant. Such incredible news seemed to her. The hostess said that the guy was sucked into the rift. He lost both his memory and the sense of time. He looks 25 years old, as he did at the time when he disappeared, which surprised Dasha very much. The woman admitted that this is why she looks so happy lately. She also added that she was so lucky only because she had the opportunity to help others and lived a good life. A son and a beloved daughter who returned 10 years later, as well as a short life that has become much longer. The woman said that the one who has known grief should become strong and, in such situations, make every effort to prevent this for other people. Then she looked at Dasha meaningfully and asked her not to worry too much. After all, the woman believed that the girl would have enough strength to save both her and everyone present here, so she would wait for her right here in the car until she came back. These words convinced the young girl, after which she got out of the car and went to the center of events to help. At this time, the people nearby were in a panic that the rift was about to open and the awakened had not yet arrived. After that, they turned their attention to a strange girl who walked right into the center of danger and began to release fire. Her palms were sweating as people watched more and more tubers of flame appear around the girl. Her red hair allowed them to guess that the Crimson Witch herself was standing in front of them. This calmed the townspeople a little because now they were safe under the protection of a very strong awakened. Dasha had already arrived at the scene and realized that the rift would open much earlier than she expected. Therefore, the girl decided to prepare in advance, collecting some fire in reserve. She didn't know what to expect from the unknown rift, so she decided to use all her strength. Dasha summoned the power of fire, then divided it into several parts, leaving it hanging in the air next to her. After all the preparations were completed just in time, the girl was able to fully prepare for the attack. She stood waiting, knowing that as soon as the rift opened, she would immediately begin to attack and would not allow any monsters to reach the people nearby. As soon as she thought about it, a crack appeared on the rift, and the eye of the monster appeared. The people around also noticed that it was beginning to open up, so they rushed to the cliff with even more urgency. At this time, a herd of giant nightmarish animals broke free. The Crimson Witch immediately recognized them as steel-horned goats, which were a very dangerous enemy even for her. Although she was an S-class mage, she still shouldn't underestimate such opponents as they had high magic resistance and weak melee attacks. Dasha realized that in this situation, it would be better to use an awakened specializing in close combat. However, the girl immediately realized that there were no other awakened nearby, and even if they made it in time, she still needed high-level fighters. Therefore, in order to protect the people close to her and the townspeople, the girl must stay and hold back the advance of the monsters. She definitely could not stand idly by because her mother was here. After that, Daria immediately decided to attack. Gathering a huge amount of her magic power in her hand, the girl unleashed all her power on the first of the monsters with a single blow, causing an explosion of immense force. The witch was furious that even such a huge explosion could not cause damage to the monster due to its high resistance to various kinds of magic. It simply flooded against the animal's shell without causing any harm to it. Therefore, the Crimson Witch decided to resort to another spell that had a more powerful physical effect. A huge spear of azure flame magic fire slammed down on the monster's back, piercing through its body. The goat immediately fell to the ground, a huge hole gaping in its body, which was left after the blow. Dasha spent a few moments catching her breath and coming to her senses. At this time, the rest of the monsters were already rushing towards her, having managed to break through the rift. The girl counted 10 goats while she herself could only use the azure flame 8 times. A moment later, she pushed herself off the ground with force and soared up. The girl then slammed down on the second goat with force, thrusting her flames directly into its head. Dasha was angry that the reinforcements hadn't arrived yet, and those idiots from headquarters didn't know at all what it meant to show up on time. The girl understood that the azure flame would not be enough for all the monsters, so she would have to resort to an even more powerful and dangerous means. It was magic that covered her entire body with fire. She had chosen it because close combat was a weakness of these monsters, but technology wouldn't help her much. The girl waited a couple of moments before the animals began to slow down. After that, she used her new magic and went on the attack with lightning speed. A moment before the blow, Dasha gathered all her strength in one hand, concentrating it there. Then she lightly touched the animal's head with it, directing all her energy to that place. Huge streams of blue flames burst out of her hand, which were supposed to take the life of the monster. It lasted only a moment. Then the girl's skin was covered with spots, and the goat's body began to exude steam. Immediately after that, Dasha jumped over the monster, leaning on it with her hand. The girl did the same thing again, concentrating all her strength in her leg. She delivered a crushing blow, throwing the huge monster into the air. After that, Dasha fell to the ground. She had 8 more monsters to defeat, and they were already rushing towards her at full speed, which did not bode well for the girl. She struggled to her feet. After a short fight, her muscles were already starting to feel tired. The girl knew that she was unlikely to be able to cope with all of them, but she had to do everything in her power until reinforcements arrived. Suddenly, something caught her attention. It was the rift that began to suck in nearby objects. At this moment, the girl could only think about the fact that her mother was still behind her. Several small stones rose into the air, shining as if they were surrounded by magic. After that, they fell exactly onto the heads of each of the remaining goats, instantly killing them. Immediately afterward, our hero appeared in the air, thinking that his old friend was still as flaming as she had been before. He slowly knelt down next to Dasha, who was lying unconscious on the ground. Caster thought that the girl was in great pain due to the depletion of her magical power, so he tried to help and put his hand on the Crimson Witch's back. Although he couldn't help her restore her life force, he could replenish her magic force so that the life force wouldn't burn up and affect her mana core. Now was not the time for reminiscences, but the guy was glad to see his girlfriend again after so many years of separation. After a while, the Crimson Witch came to her senses and sat down on the cold ground. The girl looked at her hands and was surprised that she did not feel any pain at all. It didn't matter at all now, though, so she got up and ran as fast as she could back to the car. The girl was extremely happy to see that her mother was completely fine and safe. At this time, the woman was already standing on the street and talking to one of the policemen. She was also very happy that she was able to see her ward safe and sound. The woman immediately reached out to the girl to find out if she was okay and if she was injured. The Crimson Witch decided to lie a little and said that everything was fine with her because the reinforcements arrived in time. The girl said that she was a little tired, but she did not have any serious wounds. After that, both women laughed happily because they got off so easily. After that, they decided to go out for dinner as they had planned before, so they needed to look into the store. However, Dasha had already changed her mind about eating the stew and suggested that her mother go to her restaurant so that Costa could cook them her favorite rice cakes. At this time, our hero was just in the restaurant and was thinking about when his mother and girlfriend were planning to return. Their first meeting after a long separation was very joyful. Dasha threw herself on the guy's neck, knocking him down. Costa sighed tiredly after such an emotional meeting with his old friend. He remembered the first minutes of their reunion and realized that the girl was much more grumpy than she had been before. The mother of our hero said that she was very tired today, so she was going to rest. Finally, she asked Costa to cook a delicious meal when Dasha came and also not to quarrel with her. The doors to the restaurant opened and late visitors entered. It seemed to be Sergei and his young secretary. The guy was very happy to meet him. At this time, Costa was trying new snacks, not expecting to see anyone at such a time. At first, Sergei even thought that the guy had a break, but he persuaded him. Our hero said that he was just preparing night snacks because there were no visitors. After that, he led his dear guest to a table and told them about tonight's menu. The young director remarked that the ingredients for such food were too difficult to obtain in their time, to which the hero said that the young people paid enough last time, and he thought that they needed to change the subject. The guy noticed that today the couple looked even more tired than last time. After these words, they generally fell into despondency, which greatly surprised the young cook. The guys literally wrapped their heads in their hands and were very upset about something. It turned out that their company's negotiations went badly, so they had to pay a huge amount of money. Then the chairman's son announced the amount of return of 500 billion won, which greatly surprised our hero. Costa could not believe in the existence of such a huge amount. His whole body suddenly weakened and began to shake. Sergei said that they had a problem with the guild. They invested in the newly renewed dungeon they had bought, which had suddenly disappeared without a trace. The renewable dungeon slowly releases monsters when the owners draw a magic circle, so they had invested about 500 billion won in it. Costa immediately realized that they were talking about the dungeon that he had cleared, so he was really horrified by what he had done. He said that this is an unaffordable amount for most people, so he clarified whether they were talking about the place that until recently was filled with all kinds of equipment. Sergei confirmed that all this belonged to their guild. There were so many things piled up there that the guy most likely noticed it when he passed by. The main problem was that they missed a great opportunity for the guild to become stronger because the awakened trained in that dungeon. It provided them with the financial stability they aspired to become a strong guild capable of clearing difficult dungeons and recruiting strong awakened. After that, Costa immediately asked what exactly had happened during the negotiations. Because of such questions, Sergei suggested that Costa could hide his identity behind a restaurant and, in fact, be a journalist, but the guy convinced him otherwise. He admitted that his mother owns this place, and he himself just helps her because he loves to cook. After that, Sergei admitted that they were really lucky to meet here by chance, after which he asked the name of our hero. The guy introduced himself and said that he was 35 years old, which greatly surprised the guests because he seemed much younger than them. After that, Sergei introduced himself and clarified that he would turn 32 this year. If the guy looked on the internet, he would find out that he was the head of the guild of the Shinoa company. Then the young son of the chairman looked at his secretary meaningfully. The girl immediately introduced herself, gave her age, and clarified that she was now the secretary of the guild leader. Costa thought that he already knew this, but he only said aloud that, in fact, he was unemployed and was still very far from being a reporter. After that, he began to cut meat, and the young people decided to make friends with such a good cook and offered him a snack with them. Our guy gladly agreed. At that moment, the keeper called him in his mind, and the big white dog ran into the kitchen and stared at our hero. He told Costa that there was a new quest to fulfill a wish. The number of karma points as a reward for completing a quest depends on the consequences that will be caused by its successful completion. So this promised as many as 5 million points. This meant that the two guests who needed help clearing the A-rank dungeon weren't blinded by their own interests, so helping them meant helping a lot more people. Costa thought that this would help raise the level of the keeper, which meant that it would be possible to cure his mother's illness faster. At this time, he had just finished cooking the dish and put it in front of his visitors. The guys were completely delighted with its appearance and clarified whether cooking was just a hobby for our hero. The guy admitted that the restaurant has been owned by his family for 3 generations, so he is interested in this area. After that, the guests tried the dish and were completely delighted with its taste too. The three of them were sitting nicely and having dinner when Costa decided to ask if the guild could get their money back. He suggested that although this deal was significant because it could lead to a large growth of the guild, they should return the money to it since the rift was gone. Sergi replied that as compensation, they were given the opportunity to clear the ranked dungeon. At first, Costa thought that this was a great option, but the thoughtful expression on the faces of his new comrades confused the guy. Diana clarified that although this was not a bad offer, it was different with the ranked dungeon. The girls said that there were almost no rank awakened in their guild, much less than 5 rank awakened to clear them. Therefore, for a guild like them, this is just an impossible dream. Sergi agreed with all of the above and added that if they had at least one's rank awakened, then it would be much easier for them to clear this dungeon. Costa thought that the matter was quite serious, after which one thought suddenly came to his mind. He called out to his new friends and invited them to introduce them to someone. The guys were so shocked by what they saw that Sergi even dropped the spoon from his mouth. Right in front of them, some red-haired girl tried to strangle Costa. During this whole squabble, she did not pay attention to those present. Then she noticed them and became embarrassed. The girl immediately let go of our hero's neck, smiled sweetly, and greeted the people once. As a child, Costa asked Dasha why she treated him differently from others, to which the girl simply smiled calmly and said that he was her friend. She continued by saying that someone like her is only friends with a certain type of person. She added that our hero was one of those who could be her friend, which confused the guy. It was hard to believe because, at the moment, it was difficult to say. Dasha simply tied up her old friend and left him hanging upside down at the entrance to the restaurant. At that time, she was talking with Serge and Diana, who offered her to help them clear the dungeon. The guys added that she could help them only if she had time for it. In return, they would definitely not remain in debt. In fact, they could really use the help of such a powerful, awakened one as the Crimson Witch. In response to this, the girl thought for a while and then asked the guys if they knew how to drink alcohol. This unexpected continuation of the conversation caused surprise on the faces of the restaurant guests, but they agreed. After some time, Costa was able to free himself from his bonds and return to the establishment. He was angry that the boys had messed up so much, but he was glad that he had convinced them to go somewhere else for the second round. The guy noticed that the quest was still not completed because the corresponding notification window had not appeared, but he thought that the girl would somehow sort out this matter. The Guardian replied that the level did not rise so quickly. Perhaps this was due to the fact that the guys were quite famous. After which, Costa offered to go to the mountains with him as a reward for the quest. He said he was going to get ingredients to cook a nutritious meal for himself and his mother. He was going to dig up and prepare a plant that could only be found on the mountain. It was useful for those suffering from lung cancer. In addition, this mountain is considered a gray area, and Galgoro black bears have often been seen there. These are demonic monsters, the danger level of which reaches the first level. They have a rather nasty character and capture a large territory. As soon as an intruder appears on it, they begin a battle with him to the death, even if the intruder is the same bear. Therefore, the only race that can get along with them is the golden bees, which can hardly be called demonic monsters. The keeper clearly didn't like being put on a leash, but Costa noticed that it would be difficult to move around the city without it. So, he asked the wolf to be patient a little. It was all for the sake of restoring stamina and finding ingredients for the food that the guy was going to cook, which pleased the keeper a little. The truth was, let it all be for the sake of finding the next guardian and trying to impose succession on another person. But the wolf still had little reason to justify going into someone else's house to save a dying man. This behavior only meant that the guardian actually loved people very much. After which Costa thought that he was really taking advantage of the kindness of his guardian god. However, the guy noticed that he was not going to become his successor. He was not going to become someone as great at all. After this, a complete image of a guardian wolf immediately appeared in our hero's head. The guy had already forgotten what he looked like in his usual size. After which, the hero decided that it would not be difficult for him to protect one single person. After some time, the strange company of a man and a white dog arrived on the mountain. The guys had been walking around looking for the plant they needed for a long time. Finally, they found the necessary ingredient and began to assemble it. Costa was just telling his friend that the taste of this plant is not the main thing, because it helps well in restoring stamina. Before he could finish speaking, he immediately felt the presence of a huge black bear. The wolf also immediately felt the energy that emanated from this monster. Our hero put the plants behind his back, straightened up, and asked the keeper to hold the bear for a while. He would have done it himself, but he had something more important to accomplish than that. He took out a glass jar from his bag that he had prepared in advance. The honey from the bees he talked about at home is very tasty and restores a lot of stamina. After these words, the keeper agreed to detain the bear, which made our hero very happy. The guy asked to give him about 10 minutes to collect honey, after which he had to return and help the keeper. A huge bear, angry at the presence of strangers on its territory, advanced on the intruders. Costa saw the monster approaching, so he once again asked his guardian friend to detain him for 10 minutes, after which he promised to return soon and set off at lightning speed in search of honey, so as not to waste a second of time. The smaller wolf took a deep breath from the fact that such a difficult task was assigned to him. At this time, the bear wasted no time. With its huge paws, it broke the thick trunks of perennial trees with one blow. The guardian looked at his opponent. He could not believe that he had actually agreed to this adventure. At about the same moment, Costa had already reached the place he needed. So he was now sitting on a tree and thinking about a plan of action. The guy was still a little worried, but he was sure that the keeper would be able to take care of himself, and he had more important tasks now. From his mana, the guy formed small golden balls that were supposed to help him in his business. Then, still high in the tree, Costa sent them to the nearby territory. He knew that even by lightly touching the bees with magical power, they could be forced to return to the hive, and it would not be difficult for him to find them. As soon as he thought about it, one of the bees fell into his trap. Thanks to this, our hero immediately guessed where he should go next. Therefore, he pushed off with force from the tree branch and moved after the insect. It was not difficult for him to find a bee among all these forest plantations, thanks to his magic. After that, all he could do was follow her closely. After all, he would need about 5,000 bees to receive honey at least once a month, and in addition to the excellent taste, it also perfectly restores stamina. Therefore, Costa was very happy that he was able to stumble upon a large flower field, which was completely filled with bees. The guy froze briefly in admiration for such a beautiful view that revealed itself to him in this forest clearing. One of the giant bees landed on his hand, and the guy realized that everything was fine with their size. He began to look around in the hope of finding the place from where they were all flying out. Having walked a little to the side and moved the branch to the side, our hero found what he was looking for. Not far from the clearing, among the small trees, there was a huge beehive. Costa was very surprised by such a huge size, although he was counting on it. He was especially pleased that, thanks to such a large size, there would be enough honey to come here not once a month but once a week. Our hero began to knock on the walls of the bee house, hoping to snatch a piece of it for himself, and the insects stung him. Defending their shelter, our hero still managed to collect a sufficient amount of pure, beautiful honey. Costa knew that this would be enough for him for the first time, so he was excited about his first test. The guy really thought that he should come here every week. Suddenly, something surprised him very much, and he even exclaimed a curse. In fact, Costa remembered that he had completely forgotten about his friend, the Guardian. At this time, the Guardian was fighting an unequal battle with a huge magical bear. In the heat of the slaughter, the animals even got to the hero himself, which allowed Costa to find himself on the battlefield. The guy immediately rushed to his white wolf, coming to his aid. The Guardian was clearly very exhausted, so Costa immediately apologized for losing track of time. The guy put his hand on his friend's now soiled white fur. He realized that he had too high expectations for him because he was far from in the best shape. The hero realized that the keeper came to his house out of his kindness. He did everything he could to help him, but the hero took it for granted. He even sent his wolf, in his weak state, to fight a real magical bear. The guy realized that everything happened through his fault, so he promised himself not to kill the monster with lightning speed. He went to attack the monster and put all his strength into one single blow to the head. His intention was simply to euthanize the animal. About a week later, we then see the restaurant owner come out onto the porch to meet someone. She saw her son returning, all rumpled and dirty from a run on the mountain. The guy said that today they were very lucky. He was able to get fairly cheap honey and dug up some medicinal plants. But their conversation was interrupted by a company consisting of Sergei, Diana, and Dasha, who fell out of the restaurant with a hangover. They tearfully asked our hero to prepare hangover soup for them, and he was angry that they had the audacity to drink all night, and then come here again. At first, his mother did not understand how to react to such a strange gathering, but then she cheered up, following the rest of the company. She had no idea that this was a completely unusual honey. So she suggested making them some refreshing honey water to help them relax. Our hero asked his mother not to stress too much. The woman said that everything was fine with her, but let him not neglect the connections he had already created. She took the jar of honey from her son's hands and sent him to prepare breakfast. Meanwhile, the guardian again turned into a small white dog and rested in our hero's bag. Several years ago, young Dasha told our hero that once when she was adopted, she was immediately sent back, which surprised the guy. He asked if it was normal for her to tell him this. However, she added that at that age, she could not do anything about her anger. So 2 months later, those people sent her back to the orphanage. At the time, she didn't understand why she was returned, but as she grew older, she began to understand the reason. The girl was clearly upset about something, so she said that she needed to hide who she really was. After that, in all foster homes, families, she began to behave as calmly and sweetly as possible. Dasha said that she tried to adhere to this pattern of behavior for the rest of her life. These memories came flooding back to our hero as he looked at his now eccentric, drunken girlfriend. Dasha jokingly said that honey water is so good that it seems to her that he added something else to it. After that, the whole company began to discuss what a wonderful cook Costa had become. They also complimented our hero for looking very young for his age. They endlessly demanded hangover soup, breakfast, or honey water, which greatly irritated our hero. The guy warned that he wanted to fry some of the plants that he had dug up in the mountains, but he immediately warned that he wouldn't give much to the guests because, in fact, he was doing it for his mother. Sergei was immediately surprised that, even though the guy had honey and plants in stock, it was extremely difficult to get this food. At this time, the guy asked his secretary whether Costa would be uncomfortable if he also paid, although he had even prepared a gift. He had prepared them as a thank you to his friends. One of his employees gave them to him this morning. Dasha was very inspired by such a surprise, so she asked to give her gift first. She joyfully extended both hands forward, expecting Sergei to put something in them. The guy turned around, reached into his bag, took out a box, and put it right in the girl's hands. Dasha immediately noticed that even the box looked very cool and asked if it could be opened. After permission, the girl carefully opened the lid. Inside, on a red velvet pillow, lay a watch, and she immediately put the gift on the table and said that it looked very expensive. She could not accept it. Sergei noticed that this was a gift, including for her future help. The watch was fireproof and should withstand even the strong flame of the Crimson Witch. Dasha listened carefully to every word the guy said. The girl was absolutely delighted with this gift. She really liked it. She even jokingly asked Sergei if she could marry him. At this time, footsteps were heard from the inside of the house, and someone entered the kitchen. It turned out to be the owner of the house, who came downstairs because of the noise. She saw that her son needed help, so she decided to go to him. In fact, the guy had everything under control. He brought out an absolutely amazing platter of appetizers. Every person present here spoke positively about the smell, color, and appearance of the food. Costa said that this was done thanks to the amazing culinary skills of his school friend Dasha, meaning himself. After that, he put away the extra dishes in the sink, then joined his friends at the table and asked if it seemed to him that Dasha was going to marry Sergei. The guy was in such shock, but the girl happily began nodding her head in agreement. There was probably still alcohol in their heads. That's why the guys reacted like that. Sergei looked at Costa and his mother and tried to convince them that this was just a joke. He explained that he just gave the girl a gift. He had prepared it for the owner of the restaurant, but now a strange atmosphere arose. The hero's mother was amazed that someone had prepared a surprise before her, but she was pleased. At this time, Sergei pulled out from his bag another similar box with a watch on a pillow. The woman also admitted that the watch was very beautiful, but she doubted whether she should accept such a gift. However, the guy said that everything was fine because her son saved their lives. Now they would go to the restaurant quite often. He suggested thinking of it as a bribe, as a joke. After which, he began to talk about one special place, a dwarven workshop. The guy continued to talk about how the dwarves are one of the races that came to Earth after the Great Cataclysm. Sergei added that the Great Cataclysm was both a disaster and an opportunity for them too. Since they could not find ways to return, they decided to adapt to life on Earth because they had no other choice. So the government gave them a region to settle. The company recruited them to sell little things that they could make with their techniques. He didn't have time to finish when Dasha immediately understood what was going on. She said that they recently aired an advertisement, and a kitchen knife made from it looked very cool. The company is quite popular among housewives. His mother was surprised that her gift was bought in such a great place. Sergei awkwardly noted that since they were stopping in one place anyway, he put away the gifts there too. The guy began to talk about how it was always profitable, but he was afraid that he had upset his mother too much with his cold calculations. However, the woman still said that she would accept such a gift with gratitude. She admitted that if she refused, it would be rude to them because they spent so much effort on getting this watch. Sergei was very pleased that such a wonderful woman thanked him sincerely. Before the guy could remember the joy, someone's strong hand grabbed him by the tie. Then the fist clenched forcefully and even began to cause some pain to Sergei. It was Costa who put a threatening expression on his face and ordered his friend to be honest with him. Sergei was even frightened by such an unexpected reaction to this story, and Costa, with a furious expression on his face, asked where the workshop that makes the famous kitchen knives was located. Sergei was confused, even tears appearing in his eyes. He did not expect such a question and such a reaction at all. After that, the guys were separated. Sergei went to cry to his secretary, and Mom and Dasha scolded Costa. This still did not stop the guys from going to that same dwarven workshop. A little later, Costa was in this area for the first time because he had appeared during his absence. He expected it to be some kind of strange place, but it looked quite good, a fairly reliable building. He ordered the wolf to follow him, although he did not understand why he came here. The guy explained that it is ideal to be as passionate about completing the quest as possible. This was the only way to quickly cure our hero's mother, with which the keeper could not but agree. He wanted to answer something to our hero, but he was not allowed to do so. A red disc flew right in front of the wolf's nose, and a beast, like monster, rushed after it. It was surprising that people did not run away in fear. On the contrary, they watched this performance with enthusiasm. The Guardian looked at all this as if he was not at all surprised. He admitted that the dwarves were quite comfortable on the ground because such physical ability could be used to perform acrobatic feats. However, then, he looked at how some human child was sitting on the neck of an animal and added that they were a rather aggressive race, so their pride could be hurt. Costa looked around and noticed one dwarf whose fur color seemed familiar to him. Suddenly, a security alert sounded throughout the village, calling on all visitors to leave the place. But our hero clearly had no intention of following this decree. Costa was almost caught by a guard, so he had to quickly go behind a tree and hide from his sight. The guy thought that sooner or later he would be discovered, so he needed to use the skill of stealth. However, as soon as he started using magic, someone suddenly attacked him from behind. The guy barely had time to jump away from the tree when a blow immediately fell there. If he had not managed to do this, his body would also be cut into several parts, just like this trunk. The monster held enormous power in his hands. Even the earth cracked under his onslaught. In fact, the monster sensed the use of magic, so it came to check its source. However, the guy replied that he knew him, even called him the Blue Fang Tribe, and suggested that the monster's name was Tyler. The gray wolf was very surprised by this guy's strange reaction, and our hero noticed that the wolf was not so familiar with a large number of people, but still managed to forget him. The guy said with a smile that he just wanted to clarify whether it was really his friend, but it turned out to be him. After reuniting, this small company went to the dwarven home itself. While the wolf was calling to a certain old man, the guardians noticed that this guy also had a quest. Costa replied that he first wanted to meet his old acquaintance and then watch the quest itself. After some time, a small old man came to the threshold of the house and immediately recognized our hero. The guy was very happy about such a meeting after a long separation. He immediately stood up from his seat and said the old man's real name. This grandfather was also very happy to meet him and called our Costa hero Choi. The men walked towards each other to greet each other. Costa heard that the old man had moved to live in another place, but he could not think that this was Earth. To which the old friend noted that, in fact, they did not intend to live here in the first place. He said that one day, 5 years ago, the hero Costa Choi was called up at the first meeting. The old man immediately drew attention to the hero's strange sword, which had a blade that was too large for his body, and the handle was too thick. He said that although the material of the sword plays an important role, it is also important whether the blade is suitable for its owner. After the old man tried to pronounce the hero's name several times, he suggested simply calling him Hero Choi. In gratitude for saving his family and tribe, the dwarves decided to upgrade his sword to better suit him. His little granddaughter came out behind them and screamed that her grandfather was called a genius, which appeared once every 100 years. So he was definitely telling the truth. Costa was amazed at such a bold reaction from this little girl, so he could not ignore the old man's advice. He happily handed his sword to the master and offered to play with the children while the work was going on. In fact, his games were quite strange. They brought children to tears because the guy was spinning these little dwarves on his shoulders with such force that their bodies simply could not stand it. He was asked to moderate his actions a little, after which the guy calmed down a little and decided to talk with the older dwarves. The little girl replied that the dwarves did not stay in one place until the ore was depleted, but they themselves were on the move and were almost at their destination. The world in which they lived, due to the invasion of demons, began to resemble ruins more. The magic of teleportation, which allows them to move between worlds, spends a large amount of bodily and magical power and could have trapped them in the eternal universe if they had miscalculated. Therefore, they thought that they were very lucky to get into the kingdom of spirits until they were attacked by ostriches. The whole family was preparing for the inevitability of death until, at the last moment, a hero suddenly appeared and saved them. The granddaughter said that they all survived only thanks to him, but still, she didn't think they would stay here for long. After this, the guy admitted that he himself also did not belong to the kingdom of spirits. He is here only until they get rid of all the demons. In any case, the guardians of this place will not send him back until he wins and achieves his goal. The girl listened carefully to his story and offered her help. She said that she could return the hero back to the world from which he came, which greatly surprised him. He even thought that the guy didn't hear her, so she repeated her offer again. She said that she would need to ask the elders first, but since the hero helped them, she did not think that they would be against it. The hero didn't expect everything to happen so quickly, so he didn't know how to respond to this. He needed some time to think about her proposal and decide. Meanwhile, The granddaughter continued to talk about how they would have to try several times, but mistakes could not be avoided, and they would also need a huge amount of magical power. I suggested that even with a huge amount of power, they would still need to complete the magic that allowed them to travel between dimensions. In addition, even if the probability of making a mistake was almost zero, the risk of getting lost in space still remained. The girl was amazed that the guy knew a lot about their own magic. Therefore, Costa looked at her with gratitude and decided to refuse their offer because he believed that he would still be able to return to his home world. At that moment, images of his mother and Dasha came into our hero's head. However, the last time he saw them was so long ago that they were blurry, and the guy could not remember anything clearly. At this moment, one of the adults from the tribe approached them and warned them that the sword was almost ready. This made our hero very happy, so he suggested coming closer and waiting there. He once again expressed his gratitude to this little girl and asked her not to be upset. After some more time, Costa was surprised that the dwarf family still decided to come to another dimension. The news was told to him by the huge lion, who had heard it from someone else. Our hero was very happy for his friends, but at the same time he was surprised why they decided to leave so suddenly. Perhaps, in that world, there were many magical stones that the courtyards really needed. Most of the stones in this world are found inside monsters, and dwarves are not very good at fighting, so digging would be ideal for them. But in the spirit realm, this type of stone is difficult to find. After this conversation, our hero climbed onto the back of his friend, the lion. He decided that he definitely needed to say goodbye to his old acquaintances. Lev warned that Maxime was there, helping the tribe to travel their magic through the dimension. Our hero was not very friendly with this Maxim, but promised not to do anything, after which this strange couple immediately went to the village. The huge lion covered long distances in just one jump, so the hero had to hold tightly to his mane. At this time, in the village, the elder was already running towards Costa. Both of them were very glad to see each other after quite a long separation. Costa said that he hoped the tribe would get used to this place and settle here, but it seems too difficult for them. He can help them with many things, but he was powerless against the ecosystem. The guy noticed that the old man had tears in the corner of his eyes, ready to flow. He admitted that the hero already helped them a lot. He saved them from death many times. If not for him, they themselves would have become spirits and would not have tried to travel through dimensions. After these words, another dwarf came out of the crowd and brought out something in his hands. The old man asked to accept this as a small parting gift. This bow was made by one of the best blacksmiths in the history of their tribe. At one time, he was the 7th leader who became famous for his artificial skill. This bow does not need arrows. You can simply pour in magical power and the arrow will appear on its own. Costa was amazed and asked if they were sure that they wanted to give him something valuable. However, in response, the elder bowed to him and said that thanks to his courage, they themselves wanted to become better. This is their way of repaying him. He offered it himself because the bow is the treasure of their tribe. However, before this, they all consulted together, so this is a gift from the entire tribe. Only after this, Costa noticed that now not only the old man, but also absolutely all the inhabitants of this settlement were bowing to him. The magic portal had already been opened, so the old man finally added that he prayed that in the future there would be no difficulties on the hero's path. Remembering all this, our hero could barely hold back his tears from the surging emotions. But at this time, the whole company sat in the human world and enjoyed their reunion at the game. The old man admitted that he did not hope he would be able to see the hero again, so he was really happy. Then he added that he heard Costa wanted to ask him for a favor. After that, our hero remembered why he came here in the first place. He handed the elder a note with a drawing and said that he was going to give it to a hunter he knew, so he just needed the device to work without having to put in a lot of effort. The old man thought for a long time, and the hero even thought that this was too difficult a task. Grandfather explained that the density of magical power on the ground was too weak, so now they couldn't activate the brazier using magical power, and the mana core was damaged in the last move. They were prepared for the fact that something would go wrong during the spatial transition, so they landed on the ground without any problems. He apologized for the fact that the hero had put so much effort into finding them, but the tribe was defeated. To this, the hero remarked with a smile that they had absolutely no need to apologize to him. The elder was surprised by the guy's easy reaction to his words. However, the hero asked his elder friend to come a little closer to him. After that, he pointed his hand in his direction and began to exude some kind of magic from it. He used this power to restore his friend. The old man immediately felt that something had happened to his mana core. Costa explained that he tried to invest magical and life force. Although today was the same as before, it should have been much better. After that, he gave his friend a whole glass of golden bee honey, which could help him. The guy admitted that he was lucky and was able to get some, so now he was happy to give some of it to his friend. Costa said that he would try to make sure the entire tribe could restore their mana core, but in the middle of the conversation, he noticed that the dwarf began to cry. The guy immediately rushed to find out what happened. Suddenly, the old man reacted like that. He said that with such help he would only need 1 day to complete the task. He was very grateful for the help. He looked at the drawing on the sheet and said that he would try to complete everything on time. After that, our hero returned home using his unimaginable power, doing it in the blink of an eye. He immediately received a message from Serge that the date had finally been determined when they could go on a raid in the dungeon. Costa continued to talk to him on the phone, and at this time he went inside the restaurant. Sergei said that in 3 days, the dungeon itself would appear, and their raid would take place in 7 days. After that, our guy asked if his friend Dasha had told him about this. He was not satisfied with the answer, so he invited Sergei back to his restaurant to discuss the problem. But he could hear absolutely nothing. He only burst into tears while lying on the table. It turned out that Dasha agreed while she was drunk, and then sobered up and simply took back her words after the party. The girl heard Serge's proposal again and said that she didn't remember anything. Then, she added that she didn't work in groups at all. Costa calmed his friend down and said that he should have concluded a written contract with the girl or recorded the conversation while they were drinking. After this, our hero came up with a great idea, so he invited Sergei to have a drink during the day. He added that Dasha herself loves to drink throughout the day. According to their plan, Costa was supposed to try to negotiate with her, and Sergei was to take advantage of this. After that, our hero immediately dialed his friend's number to ask her to come to the restaurant. The girl did not pick up the phone for quite a long time, but eventually did. She immediately said that she had warned him yesterday that she would not do anything for him. However, Costa noticed that he had a different opinion about his friend, who had never broken a promise to someone before, but he himself called for a completely different reason. He just wanted to offer her a drink, after which they agreed on a time to meet and hung up. The first phase was completed successfully. After the end of the conversation, Costa said that he was able to drag Dasha into the restaurant, so the second stage of the plan was up to Serge. The young director was very grateful to his friend for what he did for him, after which he left him alone in the hall and went to the kitchen to prepare snacks. At this time, a car stopped outside with a huge squeal of tires. The young businessman shouted to his friend, the cook, that the girl had arrived. Dasha entered the restaurant and hoped that all preparations for drinking had already been completed. She was very surprised to see Sergei because no one warned her about this. The girl was angry that they called her for this, but Costa said that Sergei was just passing by and decided to come in. He wanted to leave when he heard that Dasha would come here soon, but she caught him on the way out. So, he suggested that they both stay. Sergei was grateful for this offer but asked whether everything would be fine. He was worried about Dasha's reaction, but the girl said that nothing bad would happen and he could stay. Sat down at the table, they began to discuss the snacks that their mutual friend had recently prepared. However, Dasha still noted that she would not change her decision, even if they all drank together, because she had never participated in dungeon raids. She was already responsible for the faults, and it was more comfortable for her to work alone, especially since a group of at least 5 people was legally allowed to clear the dungeon. The girl noticed that she and her team tried to work together, but most were focused on their opponents more than she was. They were strong enough alone, so teamwork did not go well. Sergei was jealous that they were strong alone, but the girl did not share his feelings. In fact, she didn't want the whole world to know that the more she used her powers, the crazier she became. If others found out, they would likely even publish an article saying that the Flame Witch had gone crazy. Before this, she had silenced people with money, but she couldn't imagine how to silence the awakened ones of the wealthy Shinua Guild and their workers. While they were all sitting at the table and eating, the girl muttered something under her breath, after which Costa noticed that the girl easily breaks promises and refuses without even explaining the reason. He said that Sergei must please his father and not get caught by the yellow press. Everything was so bad that he was forced to ask for help from an unemployed guy from a street restaurant. So, he asked to take all this into account. He added that, even though what Costa said was true, Dasha should not feel obligated. The girl tried to appear again, but the guy didn't let her do it. Sergei repeated his phrase, this time emphasizing the word obliged. Dasha immediately realized that she was simply being manipulated, so she was embarrassed. She noted that it was useless to try to put such pressure on someone who had no parents or other family members to impress, to which Costa noted that, in fact, Dasha has him and his mother, so she has no right to say that. The girl replied that, for a guy who had been missing for 10 years, he had no conscience at all, but she still thought about something. After some time, Dasha said that she would still help Sergei with the dungeon if he stopped behaving like that, to which Costa knew that the girl had been constantly changing her mood lately. However, she didn't answer anything. She just continued drinking and praised the taste of the alcohol. Our hero thought that sometimes he doesn't understand his girlfriend at all. However, he noticed a system notification that the quest to conclude a contract for a raid in a dungeon with Dasha was completed. He received 5 million karma for this. Literally, a moment later, Dasha and Sergei were already drunk and went on a spree. While the guys were resting and preparing for future work, Costa went to the kitchen and decided to clean up a little. The guy was focused on this matter when he noticed that someone was about to enter his restaurant. Literally, a moment later, the door opened, and an elder and a huge gray wolf walked inside. After that, the trio went to a park nearby to see something. Both dwarves were very surprised that, in the middle of the city, there was a tree of peace growing on the ground. Meanwhile, it had already grown quite tall, even sprouting several branches and illuminating everything around with its magnificent appearance. Costa said that this is the same tree the world gave him his seed before he returned. It grows quite well. The elder even noted that the spirit responsible for it must live here. Costa admitted that he couldn't even grow a cactus himself, so he simply made a contract with a spirit nearby, then clapped his hands, urging it to come out immediately. After this, a small spirit flew out of the crown of a small tree towards the friends. He was very cute. Costa admitted that he called him Christ because he was very similar to him, to which the elder noticed that this little spirit did not at all look like a cricket. These words struck our hero to the very heart. However, the grandfather admitted that the spirit had done an excellent job looking after the place. After which, Christ flew up to the wolf and handed him a golden leaf. It was real moongrass, which he never ate because it is very difficult to find. Costa told him to try it, although the wolf would not be able to regain its true magical power, but it should restore a decent part of it. The huge monster looked at this small leaf, completely not believing in its miraculous powers. However, he still decided to trust his old friend and hastily tossed it into his mouth. As soon as he swallowed it, his mana core immediately felt a surge of power. The wolf noticed that this method worked. His energy immediately increased. Costa noted that this is a temporary effect, but moongrass grows here, so the wolf can sometimes come here and take it. He also asked his old friend, the elder, if he could enter into a contract with spirits on earth. But without waiting for an answer, Costa stepped a little to the side, bent down, and began digging in the ground, after which he pulled the small mole spirit to the surface, offering to try it on him first. He said that if something happened, he would help. His magical power. After that, both the elder and our hero extended their hands to the spirit. They laid down their magical powers in an attempt to form a contract. This method worked because the little mole immediately greeted his owner and asked for a name. Costa noticed that, as soon as the old man gave him a name, the mole would become his spirit. The grandfather was very embarrassed and decided to name his new mole Gray. Immediately after this, a contract between the old man and the spirit was concluded. The little mole turned into a shiny little ball and disappeared into thin air until he was called. The old man noticed that the hero constantly helps him, even in this world. He said that the thing behind the wolf's back was what the guy asked for. Costa took the burden off his old friend's shoulders and opened the box. He was amazed by the appearance and magical power of this beautiful bow. He was worried that the hero didn't like his gift, but the guy noticed that it even exceeded his expectations. After which, our hero decided to try it out first. He supported the weapon in his hands and noticed that it was beautiful, like any work of this master. The old man and the wolf looked at their friend, and one thought occurred to them. They realized that, no matter how much time had passed, this guy remained the same hero they had once met. Looking at this guy, they realized that he most likely chose the right path. He allowed them to live peacefully, so all they could do was help him without question. At this point, the meeting was over. The guys said goodbye until next time. Immediately after this, our hero's phone rang. He thought it was Sergei. However, as soon as he picked up the phone, Costa almost went deaf from the scream that came from the speaker. He was ready to kill his interlocutor for such a domestic attack, but he restrained himself. Sergei joyfully called him to report that everything worked out for them. He had just reported to his father, and since this was good news, he decided that Costa should be the first to know about it. He also added that tomorrow he would have to meet his father. The hero was very glad that he could help his friend. His sense of guilt only grew with each new word from Sarge, who kept saying this was entirely his fault. However, this was not all the news, because the young man once mentioned the hero in a conversation with his father. Therefore, he said that he wanted to meet with him. So, on the day of the dungeon raid, the whole team would have a snack at their restaurant. This news was so big that Costa was delighted and, at the same time, terrified of the upcoming cooking. A few days later, there was a raid. Costa carried boxes of food on the road. He looked around and thought that too many people had gathered here. Even his mother was tired under the influx of such a huge number of people. So, the hero sent her to rest until lunch. He told the woman he could do it alone, but in reality the guy was terrified of how much work he had to do. Suddenly, a man approached him wearing a very expensive shining watch on his wrist. He looked very good for his age. His appearance was clearly well looked after. The man introduced himself as Serge's father and extended his hand to our hero for acquaintance. Costa was surprised that, usually, people of higher status do not look at people of lower class. Serge's father clearly noticed the confusion on our hero's face when he turned to Costa. He immediately thought that something terrible would happen. For example, he could order to stop hanging around his son because they live in different rooms. The guy had a low status in the crowd, so he had to humiliate him in his refined aristocratic manner, after which he and his mother would be forced to flee into exile. This happened only in his imagination, but Costa had already begun to mentally apologize to his mother. He decided that if he apologized first, the man would be more lenient because he would take him by surprise. Therefore, the young guy immediately bowed to the man, hitting his head hard on the table. Instead of all this nonsense, he offered him to work for the company. Serge's father was amazed at such a strange reaction from our hero. The guy, who was bleeding from his head, did not expect such a generous offer at all. After some time, when the blood was stopped and ice was applied to the head, both men sat down on a bench nearby and began to talk. First of all, Costa thanked his friend's father for his experiences and once again apologized for what happened. The man repeated that he would like to work with the young man, but noticed that he was going to refuse. Costa really noticed that now he wanted to devote himself entirely to his family, so he wasn't sure whether he could cope with his work. To which the man noted that they themselves like to read people by their facial expressions, or rather, it comes to many people with age and life experience. So, he looked carefully at the guy again and said that he makes people put their hopes on him. Costa was very grateful for this assessment and was even a little embarrassed. They would have continued talking about their business if a whole crowd of people had not suddenly run up to the president. They informed him that a raid on the dungeon would begin soon, and reporters were already waiting for him. He turned to Costa and said that he had already understood from the conversation that he had rejected his proposal. However, it still remains in force, so he asked our hero to think again. After which, he said goodbye and left. After that, Costa decided that he should go check on the guys. Just in time. Dasha looked so bad that Costa even clarified what was happening to her. The girl replied that she was so nervous that she might even vomit. The hero was surprised that his girlfriend could be nervous, for which he received punishment. The girl noticed that this was indeed her first experience of working in a team. Costa pointed out that if she refused again, Sergei would burst into tears. Dasha admitted to her friend that the more she used fire, the more she lost her sanity. So she was worried that this would cause bad rumors about the Crimson Witch's reputation. Costa tried to cheer her up and said that she had no reputation anyway. Hearing the words that no one cared about her, the girl flew into a real rage. Meanwhile, Sergei, who led the raid, gave interviews to reporters. He turned his attention to his friend Costa, who came up to him to say goodbye before leaving. The young entrepreneur immediately noticed that something had happened to his friend's head. In order not to embarrass anyone present, our hero walked away and stood nearby behind a tree. After that, Costa carefully examined his friend and noticed that he had been training a lot. The guy was delighted that someone noticed his external changes. He admitted that he was a little nervous and wanted everything to work out, so he did a little preparation in advance. Costa noted that Sergei always tries his best, and this impresses him. Sergei's inner mood noticeably improved from just these encouraging words. In fact, Costa noticed that his friend had raised the whole class, but something still worried him. There was a suspiciously frightening aura emanating from their dungeon. Costa hoped that this was all just his paranoia. By that time, all preparations for the raid had already been completed. Sergei and his team set off, finally asking the cook to prepare food for them before returning. Costa waved goodbye to his friend, hoping that everything would go well for him. However, after some time, in a huge mountain of prepared food, the guy only thought that if his friend returned alive and unharmed, he would kill him himself. Just then, his mother finished counting and packing the boxes. The awakened should have already returned, so the guy had to hurry up and clean everything up. Suddenly, a strange feeling of anxiety and danger pierced the entire body of our hero. He was not the only one who felt this, because even the birds decided to leave these places. Costa looked at the flying flocks and agreed that he was experiencing a frightening feeling at this moment. Even the guardian began hot, rendingly calling for our hero. He was literally screaming that something was clearly wrong with the dungeon. But literally 8 minutes ago, Dasha stood in it, breathing heavily after the fight. The girl had just single-handedly defeated a whole crowd of giant scorpions. She was so strong that everyone else in the raid didn't even have to make any effort. The Crimson Witch, at that moment, was worried that people were looking at her like she was crazy. After which, Diana noticed that they entered the dungeon only 6 minutes ago. Sergei was also amazed at how strong his new friend turned out to be. After that, the guys went as close as possible to the Crimson Witch to help her if she needed anything. The girl noticed that there were no more monsters nearby, so Sergei allowed her to go outside with the others. He promised that he and Diana would catch up with the remaining team members when they were sure that the cleanup squad had begun work. The Crimson Witch was satisfied with this answer, so she and several other people headed out. All the guys made a promise to each other that they would see each other outside. However, as soon as they left the dungeon, something strange immediately began to happen. It seemed as if the sky was covered with cracks and split into several parts. Our hero, Costa, immediately felt that something was wrong. He noticed a strange energy. The technical team also detected an anomaly. A fissure appeared right in the dungeon, and in terms of indicators, it was at the level of a catastrophe. Costa ran to the specialist and tried to find out whether his friends had time to leave the danger zone. The man immediately replied that most of the hunters had left the dungeon, but Sergei, Diana, and the cleanup group were still inside. After that, Costa immediately threw off his extra apron and gloves and rushed to his friend's aid. At this time, a young businessman, his secretary, and a cleanup team found themselves inside the rift. They all also felt that something was wrong. Not far from them, in front of the cave, they noticed a fissure of frightening force. Looking at it, the guys could immediately tell that they couldn't do it alone, and the cleanup group, which was even weaker, was truly horrified by what was happening. Everyone present was very scared because they did not know what awaited them ahead. However, something had to be done, so Sergei decided to take command. He decided to calm his guys down and ordered them all to prepare. In defense, he said that as soon as he and the secretary checked everything, everyone would head towards the exit if possible. He also convinced people that everyone outside should already know about the rift, so once things calmed down, they could assess the situation. He asked everyone present to remain calm, and on behalf of the entire company, declared that he would not let anyone die there. Immediately after this, Sergei and Diana went to reconnoiter the situation. Sergei admitted that, no matter how much he ignored the strength of this fault, there definitely should have been a bladed panther there. The guy seemed absolutely right, because a huge, white, predatory cat came out to meet them. The young head immediately realized that this was a catastrophe on the level of the first great cataclysm. The last time this happened, there were more than 6,000 victims, and 2 entire islands were completely turned into ruins. The chance that the 2 of them could defeat her was close to 0, but the guy didn't expect to win anyway. He only believed and hoped that all his painful training had not gone in vain. They only needed to hold out until reinforcements arrived and the rest of the people were evacuated. At this time, our hero Costa had just made his way into the rift unnoticed. Finding himself in the dungeon, he immediately found himself on the battlefield. At that moment, Diana stepped forward to hold back the beast's attack, asking the head to cover her from the back. Costa thought that if Dasha had been here, they would not have been able to take control of the situation. However, if he intervened, he would then deal with the consequences. There, before him, urgently needed to figure out how to help his friends. At this time, literally with one blow, Diana went flying and crashed into a rock. The blow was so strong that the girl clearly suffered serious injuries. Sergei was horrified that even his strong friend was so easily injured. Now, he was the only one who needed to protect them both. Seeing such reckless actions of his new friend, Costa could no longer sit on the sidelines. He took the gift from the elder and threw it with all his strength right in the middle between the monster and Sergei. This caused the young director to jump to the side and lose his balance for a while. But then, a voice rang out in his head, ordering him to take the bow in his hands. The guy absolutely did not understand where it was coming from or what kind of bow he was talking about until he saw a weapon stuck in the ground in front of him. Only after this did the young man notice that the voice was coming from this very bow. He did not know that his friend Costa was speaking to him through it, ordering him to take up arms. Sergei had no choice but to obey this mysterious decree. Then, the voice ordered the guy to collect all his mana in one place, concentrate it in his hand, and turn it into the image of an arrow. Sergei himself did not understand how this happened, but as soon as he thought about the arrow, his energy also turned into it. The guy didn't hesitate for long, launching his arrow straight at the beast. The arrow flew quickly, hitting the huge panther right in the throat. It had such a strong impact that Sergei immediately lost his balance and fell to the ground. At this time, outside, the father of the young director was shouting that he did not care about the condition of the dungeon or any expenses. He only asked that his son be saved. Things weren't so bad at the rift. The panther was hit with just one blow. Sergei himself was shocked that he managed to defeat such a strong monster so easily. The guy lay on the ground and looked at the defeated enemy. At this time, the monster emitted its last death rattles, after which it completely stopped moving. The young master thought with joy that it was all over now. After that, he immediately remembered that he was not here alone. He rushed to his secretary, Diana, to check her condition. The head asked the girl if everything was okay with her, if her bones were intact, to which she replied that she was hurt, but overall feeling well. She actually looked much better than before. The girl, like Sergei himself, was amazed at how easily they dealt with this powerful monster, after which they could rejoice in their victory without any sense of danger. The young leader was glad that they had defeated the panther, although not without the help of some external circumstances. Although he spoke joyfully, Diana still realized that something was wrong. She turned out to be right, because literally, a moment later, without even having time to finish speaking, the guy began to fall back. He had lost too much of the strength he had put into that last blow. Fortunately, the secretary managed to catch her boss before he fell, after which the guy came to his senses a little. He was even able to sit up on his own. Diana noticed that the head of the company would definitely be pleased. She would tell him about what happened a couple of moments after this. A portal began to appear next to our heroes. A gate opened, allowing everyone locked inside the dungeon to leave. A whole crowd of doctors was already standing outside, and Sergei's father was worried about the condition of his son. He remembered the feeling he had when he was told that a rift on the scale of a catastrophe had arisen inside, and no one could contact the people who were stuck in it. At one point, the head of the corporation was even told that the chances of his son returning were 0. However, now the danger had passed, and all the hunters were returning home. Sergei and Diana had already left the dungeon and noticed the director nearby. The man immediately rushed to hug his son, which embarrassed him a little. First, he checked to see if everything was okay with his boy, if he was safe. Immediately after this, Sergei reported that he was able to deal with the panther that came out of the rift. Her corpse should have been enough to cover the losses of the guild, but everyone present was more amazed by the fact that the guy dealt with her himself. Diana only confirmed his words, saying that by that time she could no longer fight. Chairman's father noticed that his son had done a good job, but the reason for his excitement was not the panther. In fact, the total would be enough for him to return his son safe and sound. Costa and Dasha stood nearby and watched the reunion of relatives. A few days later, Sergei joyfully entered our hero's restaurant and presented him with great news. However, Costa was not so happy about this. He was rather amazed. The young president admitted that he decided to build an institute for the awakened on this site. He added that it was quite difficult to get permission to build outside of a designated residential area. But after his victory over the panther, he was gladly given permission. He also planned to change the location of the guild office, but promised not to touch the alley with his friend's restaurant. But the problem was that Costa hated loud noises. He hoped to live in this place like a lazy, retired billionaire. Sergei continued to say that he would like his friend to be in charge of food for the builders. However, the guy didn't even have time to agree when a bun flew into his face. Costa ordered his friend to turn up and get out of this territory, to which Dasha noticed that she and her mother had already agreed to this proposal. The girl said that the hero's mother really liked this idea, though lunch would last only 30 minutes. They would pay for the ingredients, and since there would be a lot of work, they would provide good compensation. After that, Costa had no choice but to agree with the proposal of his friend Sergei, who had already eaten the bun. At this time, the Guardian was enjoying the message that they had successfully completed 2 whole quests and received additional points for them. A whopping 65 million karma points were awarded, which allowed him to immediately rise to the 3rd level. This meant that now he could finally sign the student contract that he had been waiting for so long. It was late in the evening when someone shouted loudly throughout the entire restaurant and asked to take care of him. At this sound, sleepy Costa came out to check what was happening. He was not yet fully awake. His mouth was with the remains of saliva. His eyes were crusty. At the entrance to the restaurant, he saw a young girl with a backpack on her shoulders, who was talking with his mother. It turned out that this was Miss Olga, who would be helping them with the restaurant for some time. A couple of hours later, we see the main character sitting at the table and looking very gloomy. The keeper pesters the guy with questions about whether he was kicked out of the kitchen, to which the guy snaps and orders him to close his mouth. He remembers his last conversation with Sergei, when he said that they had a very small premises and should expand. So, he should buy the neighboring building, after which he immediately fulfilled his promise. Costa was shocked by such a huge number of tables for visitors. The guy was a little angry that everything was decided for him. He even thought that all rich people were like that. The hero did not fall for this. He knew that the Guardian had left last night and returned only at dawn. The wolf was annoyed that, due to Costa's bad mood, he was now taking it out on him. He actually admitted to going to Tyler the dwarf's home. He said that when Costa helped Soroa, the keeper increased his level, and now he could sign a student contract. The wolf explained that this is something like how, if Tyler gets karma points, then he gets them too, and his level increase has a good effect on Tyler himself. This is something like a connection in a team, to put it in more understandable terms. The Guardian also said that if Costa could regularly complete quests for him, then he would be able to completely cure his mother of her illness, as soon as she reached level 5. The guy was very happy with this news because it meant that he could help his mother faster. While they were talking to each other, not noticing anything around, the door to the restaurant opened, and someone entered it. Costa had to pretend that he was actually just playing with his dog all this time. In fact, Diana and another man came to the guy because they wanted to turn this premises into a restaurant. He understood that everything depended on the business for which they bought the land, but still clarified what they needed from him. Diana explained that after surveying the entire area, they discovered a vegetable garden in the backyard of this restaurant. Perhaps it should be destroyed. Costa remembered that he had recently argued with Sergei about this. He didn't care about the safety of this place, but he was worried about the tree of the world. So he said that they grew vegetables there for the restaurant, so he would like to keep the garden. After which, Diana proposed to assign this entire territory the status of an eco-park. After this, the secretary said that as soon as they completed the design and expansion, they would begin construction. But Costa was confused by the man who was sitting next to them. It was Daniel, the foreman, who would oversee the construction. The girl brought him with her to introduce him personally. The guy was very cheerful despite his suffering appearance. He shook hands with Costa. The hero was surprised that such a young guy was already the head of a construction team, which embarrassed Daniel. Diana sighed and said that the guy used to work in their guild, but he did not have any unique ability, so he was reassigned to construction. Although he doesn't have a unique ability, he is still awakened, so he's able to work much more efficiently than ordinary people. Immediately after this, Costa learned that he had a quest to fulfill, a wish to return Daniel back to the guild. At the same time, the guy literally felt with his back how the Guardian was looking at him intently from behind. Our hero learned that the builder had the class of the largest warrior, which was very rare, especially since he had unusual abilities. A larger body meant that the more a person ate, the more fat he accumulated, his bone structure becoming extremely dense. Inflammation meant that stored fat and bone density would be used, and if he had features related to strength, speed, and mana, then his mana defense and recovery would increase. And the last compression power was the most useful feature. The guy only needed to reach the 8th level. Our hero understood that this guy had the potential to become really strong. At that moment in the kitchen, Olga and Costa's mother were having fun and cooking together. Diana continued to talk about how they needed to start with demolition. And since the equipment would be moving, the restaurant's residents might hear loud noises coming from that direction. Costa agreed, offered to feed all the workers, and at the same time get to know them. He said that such work was not a burden to him, and he would only be happy to help the guys. Everyone left, and after a while, night fell. But someone still did not sleep. Small gray mice with red eyes ran through the trash cans, squealing pitifully. One of them looked quite unusual because she had some kind of device attached to her body. This mouse behaved a little differently. It even stood on its hind legs and sniffed something, as if sensing danger. The animal immediately began to run. It rushed through the middle of this deserted street, as if its life depended on it. But in fact, the mouse had well-developed intuition, because all this time, a strange green cat was watching it. However, the animal did not manage to escape, because the predator overtook its prey in one jump. The first thing he did was press the button on the device on the back of the mouse with his strange green paw and claws, after which there was a fairly strong explosion that caused pain to the animal. Licking its wounds, the cat reasoned out loud in a human voice that it was a self-destruction device. He walked literally a few meters, after which he stopped, sat on his hind legs, and began to glow. Suddenly, the same green wings began to appear on the cat's back. A few moments later, there was no trace of the animal left. Instead, a bird soared into the sky. After some time, construction was in full swing. Cranes and building materials were delivered. Workers scurried back and forth, laying out their plans and discussing construction. At this time, life in our hero's restaurant changed dramatically. Every day, it was visited by quite a lot of workers who really liked the food in this small establishment. The guy was only too happy to feed all these hard workers because he really liked to cook. But that didn't change the fact that he still needed to discover Daniel's secret ability and complete the quest. Therefore, between work, our hero ran and looked after his ward. This time, just as he wanted to come up and talk to the guy, something stopped him. In fact, it was one of the brigade leaders who ran up to Daniel and asked him about his well-being. It turned out that, just recently, Daniel was injured very seriously, which could even lead to a fracture, but there was not a scratch on him. Although the guy was not sure that Daniel was seriously injured, he dissuaded him and calmed him down. After that, Costa's short break ended, and he went back to the restaurant to cook. Olga was already serving the workers. Today's dish, pork in sweet and sour sauce. While the girl was serving everyone at dinner, our hero did not stop watching Daniel. He lost sight of him for a while, but after just a couple of minutes, he found him again. Costa climbed onto the roof of a building under construction and looked down at his charge. It even seemed to him that sometimes he was going overboard with all this surveillance. The guy was worried about his traumatic plan, but he knew. Costa knew that he wouldn't die from this anyway. He was ready to use his strength and test his ward, but he was suddenly interrupted by the appearance of Olga, who came close to Daniel. Costa was surprised that these two were hanging out together. He even thought that they were close. Just at this time, Daniel blushed deeply and sweated with excitement. He looked at the girl and asked her if she had thought about the proposal that he had recently made to her. She clearly did not want to continue this conversation because she hesitated at such a question. The girl looked straight at her colleague and said that this would be a little problematic for her. The guy immediately realized that there was no chance for him here, so he decided to silently agree. Olga continued to criticize him, saying that although he was a good and kind person, she was embarrassed by their large age difference. They also had differences in many other trivial matters, and if they couldn't even agree on this, then disputes would always arise over other issues. At that moment, the girl enthusiastically said that she hoped to quickly pay off her student loan. For some reason, Daniel began to apologize, which embarrassed the girl a little. Costa hid on the roof at this time, realizing that he had heard something unnecessary. He was embarrassed because he came only for the quest, but overheard someone else's personal life. The guy looked down again and saw that Daniel was a little upset, so he decided not to disturb him now. All he could think of was that it was better for him to leave these two alone for now. However, suddenly something changed in his surroundings. There was a strange sound. Costa realized that just a second ago, he had accidentally used force and moved the beams a little. He tried to warn the sweet couple below, even shouting to them to move aside. However, the girl was so interested in the conversation that she didn't even pay attention. But Daniel saw all the danger and reacted to it instantly. He immediately rushed towards the fragile girl, stretching his huge arms forward with all his strength. The guy pushed the girl in the opposite direction. Although her landing was not very soft, it still helped Olga avoid the falling beams. There was a deafening blow, after which the girl could not see anything for some time through the rising dust. After a couple of minutes, the clouds dissipated, presenting a terrible picture. At the loud, piercing, desperate cry of the girl, all the people in the area began to run toward the scene. Olga sat on her knees, and with tears in her eyes, tried to move the huge, heavy beams to the side. The girl kept calling Daniel, trying to understand whether he was still alive or no longer alive. Her hands were bruised. Her nails were broken. Although they were not serious wounds, she was still injured. After some time, the rest of the workers reached the scene of the incident, and Costa looked at the whole picture from top to bottom, realizing that it was his fault. At this time, builders used various methods and devices to free their colleague from under the rubble. Our hero was suspiciously calm and thought only that these sufferings and difficulties would become the basis for achieving his goal. A few minutes later, when the ruins were dismantled, a strange picture appeared before the eyes of the builders. Even Olga noticed that it had become suspiciously quiet around, so she decided to see what was happening. Everyone was amazed that instead of the plump Daniel, there was a very thin guy with his appearance lying on the ground. Just by this time, an ambulance arrived, quickly examined the guy, and took him to the hospital. A few days later, Sergei, Diana, and Costa came to visit him, worried about their foreman. On the hospital bed sat a rather thin and athletic guy with long hair. He turned to the window. Having heard his name, he turned his head toward the visitors and greeted the head of the company. From that moment on, everyone was in absolute shock because they expected to see their old, plump Daniel. A little later, the guy said that he thought it was his peculiarity. He squeezed hard and recalled that due to the fact that he constantly and continuously ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner, he could not get rid of weight. During rehabilitation therapy, his body only stopped getting thinner when he used a lot of force. He admitted that he even jumped off the roof once to make sure of this. Although it was reckless, it confirmed the guy's expectations. At that moment, the door to his room suddenly opened, and an excited Olga appeared at the rock. Daniel was very surprised by the presence of this girl here, and everyone present was also a little shocked by how exactly she appeared. At that moment, the girl herself stopped and threw all her things onto the floor. After that, with tears in her eyes, she rushed toward the hospital bed. She ran close to the patient, leaned on his bed, and asked if he was okay. Daniel was shocked that the girl even knew where he was. He wasn't worried about himself at all, so he decided to ask the redhead if everything was okay with her. The girl cried the whole time and only said that her hand was completely unimportant now. They continued to bicker cutely with each other, while our hero, in the background, made bunnies from red apples. After this, Sergei decided to intervene in their conversation. Costa, as the head of their company and employer, was amazed that the guy had mastered the hunter class only thanks to his powers. This was his real appearance. In fact, she was worried that the guy had lost so much weight due to severe operations. After this, Daniel asked his boss if he could show him one more feature. He then freed one hand from his long sleeve and extended it forward. The guy began to concentrate all his power in one place, and gradually his hand began to glow, acquiring a purple hue. Daniel said that he initially thought it was just a morphosis, but in fact it was a slightly different feeling, as if something ready to explode at any moment bit into his hand. It was like there was a magical force around him, even though he couldn't use it. Costa thought that its potential usefulness and opportunity were simply amazing. At that time, he made a butterfly from a red apple. Daniel continued to say that, with such a feature, he would be able to do a lot. Sergei stopped him, saying that he understood perfectly well what he was getting at. Therefore, he invited the guy to return to the guild as a full member. He also offered to help Daniel better study his new ability. The guy immediately agreed, saying that he would be very pleased to work in the guild again. Immediately after this, Olga became a little embarrassed and asked to talk to her about what they had recently discussed. Daniel immediately understood what she was talking about and became embarrassed in front of strangers. However, before he could finish speaking, the girl took a full lungful of air and screamed loudly. She came close and admitted to the guy that she agreed to be his girlfriend. They were in a rather awkward situation. The girl continued to ask for only one date. Daniel was surprised because earlier she had told him that she was very busy, but all this was only because she was in the guild and had to work hard to see the guy. The girl told him her entire short life story. In fact, she admitted that she had never been in a relationship before, so she wanted to fall in love at first sight, as happened in many films and books. While the couple was explaining to each other, our hero in the background made a whole cake out of red apples. Olga ended her speech by saying that all this love at first sight stuff didn't really suit her, so she invited Daniel to learn everything from scratch with her and go on a first date. After some time, everyone began to leave the hospital for their homes. Just at this time, Costa thought that Diana looked quite distracted today, so he went up to talk to her. However, the girl was clearly not in the mood for conversation, so she politely said goodbye to him. Of course, Costa couldn't just take her word for it, but he decided to let her go for now. Instead of talking, our guy decided to simply follow Sergei's secretary. He was very surprised by the place the girl went to immediately after visiting the hospital. It turned out that she went straight to the guild's training center. Diana calmly walked up to the horizontal bar, attached her work pass, and walked on. Costa couldn't just get into this building, so he approached and asked if he could arrange a tour for the awakened ones. Immediately after this, he was registered and given a temporary pass. The guy just managed to go inside in time to notice how the girl changed clothes and went into some room. The sign on the door said that this was the guild's training room. Costa used his invisibility skill and quietly went inside until the doors closed completely. There, he saw Diana standing alone in the middle of an empty room, inside of which her power was growing. At this time, the girl was already fully prepared for battle, reaching for her sword that hung on her belt. Then, with a lightning movement, she pulled it out of its sheath and pointed it forward. She grabbed the handle with both hands and took a defensive position. To begin with, the girl practiced the most basic movements with a sword. Costa watched her and thought that her movements were good and that she was not deprived of talent. After that, he recalled the last case of the use of magical powers, be it Sergei with a bow, or even Daniel's recently discovered new excellent ability. It took him quite a long time to compare all these facts. Costa thought that the girl trains every day because she awakens so many people from her environment. After that, he waited until the end of the training and quietly left the center, heading home to feed his guardian. The guy was sitting on the floor on his knees in front of the wolf, and his eyes literally glowed. The keeper looked at the huge portion of food on his plate and immediately thought that this was definitely some kind of bribe. Costa fell in front of him in a low bow, saying that he had no hidden intentions. He admitted that during the quest, he helped Sergei and Daniel, but did not help Diana in any way. Recently, the guild announced the possibility of increasing their rank, so the guy thought that the girl was so upset because everyone around her except her had grown as hunters. Costa asked the keeper if he could help someone without directly influencing them. After that, he asked what method he should use to increase the hunter's rank. The keeper advised him to listen to the voice in his head. It could give clues. After which, he began to eat. Costa admitted that the girl is capable and her equipment is quite good. So, if she continues in the same spirit, she will be able to rise to the 5th level of swordsmanship. However, Diana could recognize his voice, so he asked the keeper to help him with at least some resources, although the guy used to say that he did not want to help others. In fact, for him, it was something like a habit. He wanted to help without personal involvement. The guardian did not think for long about this request from his new acquaintance. After some thought, he decided to give a final answer. He promised to help if a quest appeared for Diana because people have something like destiny. Meeting someone like Costa is also a kind of fate, and a little extra luck. The hero noticed that these words sounded as if they were being spoken by some stubborn old man. After that, the keeper and Costa went back to the training center to see the girl in action. They used the invisibility skill and watched her from afar, but they didn't have to wait long, because just at that time, a quest for Diana appeared. They needed to increase her level in the next 7 days. After which, the keeper promised that he would do it himself. The guardian promised to help the girl with the help of telepathy, so Costa could go about his business for now and check back later. After such strange behavior, the guy noticed that the guardian's actions very much reminded him of a Sunder. However, he still decided not to interfere with the wolf doing his job, so he went home. There, he decided to change clothes and go to the conference to which Sergei had invited him. The guy quickly had a snack and said goodbye to his mother, after which he went to the company. The woman was glad that her son had been quite busy lately and had even found new friends. At this time, the opening ceremony of a new office was taking place in the conference hall of the Shinoa Guild. Quite a lot of people had gathered there who could cover the event in the media. Several individual journalists were invited, who had already set up their cameras and were ready to film. Costa came almost to the opening itself, so he was amazed by the large number of people. He decided not to go down, but to stay alone on the balcony and watch everything from above. And just in time, because at that very moment, the poems and the speaker came out on stage. It turned out to be Sergei, who immediately thanked everyone who came to the opening ceremony of the new office and decided to personally see the birth of a new project. Costa sat on the balcony and thought only that, from afar, his friend really looked like the son of a very rich family. Meanwhile, Sergei continued to say that along with the move of the guild office, they planned to continue recruiting new people into it, giving priority to the potential use of their own characteristics and honing their skills, rather than selecting candidates only by the current rank of their magical power. This greatly surprised the specialists gathered here. The chairman snapped his fingers, drawing attention back to himself. As a first step on this path, he announced that today, what was happening was not only the opening of a new office for the Shinoa Guild, but the creation of a private educational institution for hunters. Immediately after this, a forest of hands appeared among the people who wanted to ask questions. Sergei chose one of them and asked him to voice his question. One reporter rose from his seat, first congratulating the company on establishing a new office. He then said that it was previously mentioned that the company was opening an educational institute. He clarified whether the criteria for admission to the institute would differ from the worldwide standards for measuring the magic rank of an awakened person. Sergei confirmed this information, adding that the criteria for admission to the institute would be the same as the criteria of the guild itself. Then, the guy looked out from the whole crowd at one more person who wanted to ask something. He addressed a young lady in a formal suit and glasses who was sitting in the 3rd row. The girl had seen a report that said that during an unexpected awakening, Sergei had heard a strange voice. It was thanks to him that they were able to kill the snow panther. Because of this story, many low-ranking awakened people gained hope. More and more hunters, who were quite weak before, went to recheck their ranks. However, it is worth assuming that this could only happen to the head of the Shinoa Guild. Therefore, she was interested in whether the educational institutes would not be just a simple squeeze of money from the dreamy, awakened ones. Costa was amazed that all the reporters asked such tricky questions. On the other hand, he understood that such questions did not arise out of nowhere. He understood that everything initially became possible only because of his help. However, Sergei was clearly not at a loss from such complex questions. He thanked the reporter and said that such thoughts were quite understandable because he himself constantly asks himself this question. It is possible that a miracle happened to him, and maybe he was so lucky only once in his life. However, he saw this opportunity, so he decided to grab it with all his might. Such a strange wording of the chairman's answer surprised Costa. Little did the girl reporter expect such a detailed answer from the head of the company. At that moment, Sergei called an invited guest onto the stage, which surprised Costa. Everyone present was also amazed at what appeared before their eyes. In fact, this invited guest turned out to be Daniel. He stood next to Sergei and amazed everyone with his enormous size. Compared to him, the guests were clearly impressed by this huge man. Sergei continued to talk about how Daniel was one of the first members of the guild, and that they could only find all the information about him by reading a couple of articles from that time. He admitted that the awakened C rank was a label that constantly followed him, as well as Sergei himself. He then asked to bring to the stage the very bow that helped him in the last battle. Costa was surprised that these guys were filled with such determination. At this time, on stage, Sergei defiantly took a bow without arrows and seemed to pull the string. On the other side of the stage, Daniel prepared to repel the attack. He took in as much air as possible into his lungs. After that, the guy also stood up, ready for battle. It took literally a couple of moments for Sergei to begin gathering all his strength together. Just like last time, it was not difficult for him to transform it into an arrow. After that, the guy took good aim and warned Daniel that he was about to shoot at him. All the assembled reporters and guests were horrified by what was happening on stage. Literally, a couple of moments passed, and after a short sigh, Sergei released the bowstring. An arrow of magical power immediately burst out of his bow and went toward its target. Some people even screamed in horror, thinking something traumatic would happen before their eyes. Even the cameramen left their cameras and looked at the stage with all their eyes. At this time, the arrow reached its target and hit Daniel right in the chest. Sergei calmly lowered his bow and exhaled, saying that everything went well. At this moment, a cloud of smoke rose on the opposite side of the stage, hiding everything that was happening behind it. Costa came to the dwarven village and looked for his old friend at his house. The old man was surprised by his arrival and asked him to warn him next time, although he had said before that he could come at any time. After that, the old man laughed and said that all this was said out of emotion. He was just heading to the workshop, so Costa asked to go with him. The old man agreed to go there together since the young guy wanted to look at it. After this, the keeper suggested splitting up. He himself wanted to go to Tyler. The hero was even glad about this course of events and smiled very much. The guardian looked at him and said that even without completing the quests, he was not so weak that any person would take care of him. At this time, the old man was completely oblivious to the fact that two people next to him were almost ready to fight. After that, the company went to the workshop, which was filled to the brim with various types of weapons. Some dwarves were just now engaged in forging new products. A huge magical furnace was flooded, which helped them in their work. The guy admitted that it was quite stuffy in the workshop, just as he remembered the last time. The elder announced a short break for all workers, but Costa could not stand it and even took off his shirt. After which, the old man noticed that an ordinary person would not be able to enter this room because of the heat, as the average temperature rose to 80 dec. After that, he summoned a huge piece of magic stone from behind the portal and asked Costa to make a shield out of it. The elder was delighted with the appearance of this stone because it was an excellent material that would never be seen on Earth. Costa admitted that he received it after a battle with that huge panther. He remembered that the world had really tried him, as he had never encountered such a monster in the spirit realm. The elder looked at this huge stone and said that his old friend's request would be fulfilled. But he admitted that this metal is too tough for the local equipment, because to create an account, you need a very high temperature. But due to the structure of the earth and the absence of the spirit of fire here, their capabilities were very limited. Costa thought for a minute and concluded that they just needed a spirit of fire, like that cute mole. However, the elder noted that such a spirit of the earth was lucky to be born in this world thanks to the tree, and it was unlikely that they would be so lucky again. In addition, they also needed a place that could withstand such temperatures. Costa was horrified at how expensive these premises could cost them. Costa was actually indignant that people were so obsessed with money. However, he admitted that in their situation there was still no choice. Just at that moment, one of the workers called the elder over, and they talked about something for a short time. The old man asked Costa to look around himself, but he needed to go away for a while on business. The guy just had time to think about where he could get such a room. For this reason, he even decided to turn to his guardian, who had just returned to his guardian. He didn't look very happy, but after a while, he admitted that he had an idea. These words were clearly significant. Given with difficulty, the keeper still said that the fiery fox could help them. Costa was surprised that this divine beast was still on Earth. However, the keeper also added that the fox was very broken, which greatly surprised our hero. The guardian added that the fox's core would give them the required temperature with extra reserve. However, there was one thing that confused the great divine wolf. The guardian clearly did not want to continue this conversation, but he understood that he had no choice, so he stayed silent for a little longer. Then he added that the fox was broken and devoid of reason. He was once the first guardian apostle named Ralph, who fought alongside him during the Great Cataclysm and exhausted almost all of his magical and physical power. He gave too much, and it could not help but leave a mark on him. Costa listened carefully to everything that the furry guardian told him. Then he decided that he should see everything with his own eyes. He admitted that they would still have to go to him to steal the fox's core. After that, the guy squatted down and began to think about their further plan of action. The guardian said that the fox was in the west, in a black valley where there was a mountain overflowing with demonic energy. There was not a ray of life, giving light there. That cave was teeming with all kinds of monsters. The guy was delighted that he now had the coordinates of Ralph's location, and he decided to go there immediately. He grabbed the keeper by the scruff of the neck, pushed off the ground with force, and jumped straight in the direction that the guardian had indicated to him. After some time, they landed not far from the required location. The divine wolf even felt a little seasick from such chaotic movement. However, he quickly came to his senses and began to look around. There was something to see because the whole ground was strewn with dead animals. All of this was done by one huge fiery fox, whose mouth was covered in blood. It stood over the small, lifeless animal corpses right in front of them. The guardian was surprised that his former apostle had already come to this. He looked at what was happening, and it seemed to him that he had guessed why reason did not return to Ralph. After all, when divine beasts who do not need food become weak, they instinctively begin to look for something to eat. If they try to replenish their magical power by absorbing monsters, it leads to only one outcome. Demonic energy is like poison. So if a divine beast swallows a lethal dose, it will suffer an overdose of energy. But before he even had time to finish his sentence, an attack of hot fire immediately flew at him. It went behind him and exploded somewhere behind him, destroying everything in its path. If Costa had not managed to dodge at the right moment, he would already be dead. The guy was amazed that the fiery fox detected his presence, despite the fact that the guy hid. However, he was absolutely not going to give him time to think about further actions. Preparing for the next attack in this hot ball of flame, the guy managed to see something strange. He was amazed that divine beasts were using demonic energy instead of divine power. However, at the same time, Costa needed to defend himself, so he also began to release his energy outward. He had very little time, since the beast had absolutely no intention of waiting for him to prepare. Costa barely had time to create a shield and protect himself and the guardian from the blow. The wolf only shouted that the fox could not think straight now, so whenever possible, they just needed to take away its core without causing harm. Costa was glad that the guardian was so worried about his former comrade, but noticed that he had not even done anything yet. He also added that if they left him just like that, it could be a disaster if he becomes a monster. At this time, the powers of the fiery fox only increased in volume. Even the ice that Costa used to freeze his flames began to heat up. With one quick movement toward the guardian, our hero threw him aside as far as possible. After that, the shield was destroyed, and the attack achieved its goal. The guardian stood aside and just watched as all this flame fell on Costa. He was horrified that his new friend could die just like that. However, it was too early to give up, because our hero was experienced in this kind of battle. His clothes may have been burned, but he himself escaped serious consequences. At the last moment, the guy applied force to his legs, which allowed him to jump high into the air. He admitted that the fox's fire was indeed powerful, which was to be expected from someone who had absorbed such a large amount of demonic energy. Costa decided to first get away from there to somewhere far away, and then think about how he could get the core. However, before he even had time to finish his thought, the fox moved into a new phase of the offensive. While still in flight, our hero began to be surrounded on all sides by tubes of flame. Therefore, he had to exert quite a lot of force in order to summon a new defensive technique. A whole huge horde of water appeared around the guy, which developed at his order. At this moment, the fiery tubes headed straight toward our hero. They crashed into the huge body of water with which the guy protected himself. This gave Costa a little time to land calmly on the ground and take a short break. It was at this moment that the hero finally abandoned the idea of preserving the entire forest intact. Even through such a dense shield of water, one of the attacks managed to break through and almost hit our hero. Even such a small blow could cause quite a huge amount of damage. Behind Costa's back, the guy noticed that when the body is absorbed by foreign demonic energy, this divine beast is able to demonstrate enormous power. At this moment, our hero was called by the guardian, who had been standing at a distance all this time. The guy wanted to protect his new friend, so he ordered him not to approach, but the guardian reminded him that now Ralph should not be perceived as an ordinary living divine beast. In his current state, he was ready to use any methods and means to achieve his goal. The hero didn't quite understand what exactly the fiery fox wanted to achieve, but he took note of it. The beast suddenly summoned even more of its power and began to approach our hero. It even seemed to Costa that its whole body had increased somewhat in size. At that moment, he realized that the fox wanted to burn the entire territory to the ground. So, in desperation, he rushed towards the guardian to protect him. The guy clearly didn't have time to run, so he decided to use his magical power. He imprisoned the guardian in a small space that was completely filled with his mana. Then he placed him in a ball and sent it high into the sky. At this moment, because Costa was no longer using the name of the guardian, the fox's memory began to revive. Memories of wanting to protect his friend, his master. Making sure that the keeper was safe, Costa went on the offensive. He opened the portal again, intending to graft his weapon from it. This time, it turned out to be his favorite huge sword, which the dwarves had once made for him. Ralph did not stop watching our hero for a second. He only became even more furious because he couldn't get hold of some pathetic person. This next boost made our hero dodge even more often. Costa stepped a little to the side in order to gain a little time for the attack. He only had a few seconds to come up with his next strategy. The guy grabbed the hilt of the sword with both hands, swinging it with all his might. Now, he could only wait for the moment when the fox would come close enough to him, after which Costa dealt him a cutting blow, applying a huge amount of force. The guy thought that this attack would have at least some effect. However, he immediately noticed that there was something strange about the fox's paws that he had just cut. Literally a moment later, the paws reunited as if there had been no injury. The guy realized that no physical residue would work on the fiery fox. At this time, he only in vain allowed the animal to get even closer to him. He was already practically inside the mouth of this huge monster. Costa tried to unclench the jaws with his huge sword, but failed. The huge, fiery fox sent him flying with such force that no normal person would have been able to survive for long. As if she felt something, our hero's mother decided to listen to her feelings. Her motherly heart told her something, but the woman thought that she had imagined it. Her intuition did not let her down, because at that moment, Costa was really fighting a very strong opponent. The guy barely came to his senses after such a strong blow from the fiery fox. This was almost the only divine beast left alive, but with all the demonic energy absorbed, the guy was not sure that he could stop it without killing it. Costa realized that he couldn't get infected with him at half his strength. He needed to take the enemy seriously, but he was still worried about the Guardian's request. At this time, the fiery fox began to summon a new technique, which was formed into a ball. It was a clot of energy, the very core that Costa himself was hunting for. The guy looked at the once sacred animal and thought that he should spend as much energy as possible now, so that it would be easier to defeat him later. He hoped that the fiery fox would pour all the demonic power into this core. Ralph didn't need anyone's orders, so he himself directed one of his most powerful attacks towards our hero. The guy came up with the idea to cut this clot of energy with his sword, so he now concentrated only on delivering one precise and clear blow. The core kept approaching our hero with enormous force. At the last moment, the guy realized that he couldn't cut it, so he simply beat it back to the fox. Now, the guy realized that it was definitely a core, but he couldn't understand why it was so big. Even the color was too muddy, as if it did not belong to the fiery fox at all. At this time, the animal seized the moment and attacked the hero with physical force. The guy barely managed to put his sword under the teeth of the huge beast. Meanwhile, right above them, a clot of energy continued to absorb demonic power. The sky became darker and darker from so many dark forces in it. Costa realized that they were both in danger and urgently needed to leave this place. However, the fox held the sword in his teeth and would not let go, so the hero had to come up with another plan. Instead of taking out his sword and running away, he decided to use force and simply move the fox along with him. Of course, the animal didn't like this, so shaking its head, the fiery fox made the guy get off the ground. It was at this moment, as they fought fiercely, that a huge stream of energy shot out from the core. Both Costa and Ralph were thrown with force in opposite directions. A moment later, Costa came to his senses and decided to look at the place where the cannonball fell. Literally, a few centimeters from his feet, a huge black crater was punched into the ground. Costa had a hard time seeing from this place how things were going, so he decided to get up and see what was happening. Before he could do this, a huge stream of energy fell on him from behind. The guy managed to jump away and then turn around, running into the attack. The fox did not waste time while the guy came to his senses. It decided to attack. It was still hard for Costa, but he was glad that the demonic energy had already weakened greatly. Even though he still had to put in a huge amount of effort just to dodge, there was light at the end of the tunnel. The guy dodged, delivering small blows, exhausting his opponent. Some strange feeling overcame our hero. He turned around and some unusual energy came from exactly the place where the core fell. Now, the guy managed to look at it closer and clearly realized that something was wrong. He knew that it was impossible to reach such a state by simply eating meat with demonic energy for a couple of months. The guy was sure that the fox's core was forcibly filled with dark energy because it was the embodiment of the soul of a divine beast. If the core is destroyed, it would be a huge loss for the beast. If you kill it, the core will be destroyed. The guy tried to guess what kind of demon could do this. The hero heard the voice of the fiery fox who wondered if he knew Carnis. Costa was amazed that this beast still retained the remnants of its sanity. The guy decided to check this version, so he asked the fox why he was asking him about this. to which the beast replied that this was the only name that remained in his memory. As soon as he thought about it, his head began splitting. At this time, the guardian, whom he had been looking for all this time, looked down at him. He was now in a different form and was enclosed in a protective bubble. Gradually, he came closer and closer to the fiery fox, who raised its head up and looked at him. He called out to Ralph, trying to talk to him and help him recognize him. The fox froze for a while as if listening to his words. Costa decided to take advantage of the moment and finish what he started. Since the guardian had bought some time, he had to use it wisely. The guy immediately turned around and headed straight for the hole in the ground. He extended his hand towards the core and tried to grab it. Just when the guy thought he was about to catch it, something went wrong. The guardian continued to call his former friend, trying to reach him, but instead, the huge fiery fox only opened its mouth wide. It instantly slammed shut, locking the guardian along with the ball between its jaws. Immediately after this, all the demonic energy that had been accumulating in him all this time began to come out of the fox. Now, instead of a small white dog, a huge white wolf appeared before him. Animals that were once friends were now standing opposite each other. Now, having decided in his true form, the guardian tried to talk with his former ward. However, the fox did not recognize him, whether in his small form or in his truly large one. Instead, the fiery animal simply grabbed the guardian's throat with force. Ralph knocked him to the ground, crushing him with his entire body on top, immobilizing him. The guardian was angry and frustrated that his charge could not remember him. However, he still needed to continue defending against his attacks. So, our wolf used water magic, which made the fox jump away. The guardian literally built a shield of water with all his paws, which forced him to let go. Afterward, he jumped up and began frantically calling out to our hero, Costa. He said that the core was half of the soul of the divine beast, so if they won, they would be able to return at least half to it. At this time, our hero fought desperately to free himself from the core. The guy literally extended his hand inside the core but could not do anything else with it. Meanwhile, the fiery fox was becoming more and more crazy every minute. His grin became even more menacing, and his entire mouth was covered in blood. The guardian looked at his former friend and realized that he was in great pain. He literally watched the demonic energy condensing behind him. The fire beast still did not give up, summoning more and more black demonic flames. In response to this, the guardian summoned light drops of water that could resist fire. Our heroes, at this time, tried to deal with the core. The deeper it sunk, the stronger the recoil. If the demonic power was burned from within, it could destroy the core. While in this state, the beast was in torment, and at the same time, the guy himself still had to simultaneously dodge all the attacks of both animals. The guy was angry because he had put in such painstaking work, and these two animals acted as if he wasn't even there. The hero tried to concentrate in order to set fire to the foreign body and not lose control. He was very afraid that the core would split, but the keeper said that there was nothing to worry about. After all, in fact, the core of this embodiment of the soul is a fiery fox. As long as it is not destroyed entirely, the core can regenerate and return to its previous form. After hearing this, Costa decided to get away from the two animals. He climbed onto one of the tall stone columns that were located in the forest. After the keeper gave permission to break the core, the guy's task became much easier. Now, he did not worry about the safety or integrity of his soul. He could apply more force. At this time, the fox began to feel that something was wrong with his core. Costa had already found the right place. All he had to do was literally apply a little more force. But at that moment, the fiery fox turned his attention to him. The fox decided to remove the source of pain that was causing him to suffer, so he sent a huge stream of energy directly to the place where our hero was. At the very last moment, the guardian pushed off from the ground and covered our guy with his body. Of course, Costa saw what happened, so he was worried about his friend. The keeper only said not to worry about him but to get on with his work. However, he asked the guy to hurry up because even his strength was not that much. After that, Costa concentrated even more, putting in the rest of his strength. It was this last movement that allowed him to finally break the core's defenses and shatter it. Immediately after this, the guy was able to exhale calmly, sweat still rolling down his face. Our hero held in his hand a small fragment of the fiery fox's core. Immediately after this, all the demonic energy of the beast disappeared at once, and he fell down. Literally at the last moment, the keeper managed to substitute his shoulder and soften the blow. Only now could the keeper stop worrying about his old friend. After some time, Costa came down from the cliff and ran toward his keeper. The guy immediately asked if everything was okay with the fiery fox. The keeper replied that he was simply lost in knowledge, but not for long. So he would wake up soon, but in fact he was more worried about the body of the guardian himself. What was more important was that the wolf was grateful to the man for the return of his comrade. He even touched his forehead with his nose and promised to get better soon. After this, Costa demonstrated to his friend that the core had split into several parts. The keeper was satisfied with this situation. In fact, he thought there would be even more damage. These fragments were enough. The fox would be able to recover if he did not absorb demonic beasts in the future. Just at this time, Ralph stretched sweetly and began to wake up. He had just recovered from a long sleep and still didn't fully understand what had happened. The beast was terribly surprised to see his old guardian comrade right in front of him. He was in real shock that his master had come with a man. After this, the wolf asked his ward how he was feeling. The fox was a little confused by what had happened and did not know how best to explain. Then he began to talk about how he thought everything that was happening was just a dream. He admitted that he had been consumed by this darkness a long time ago. He thought that he was deep in his dreams and that it was already too late. He believed this so much that he would even believe his master had forgotten him. After which, the keeper looked at his ward and said that he could never forget him in this world. The fiery fox replied that he wanted to believe it, but it betrayed the meaning of his life, in which no one would lend him a helping hand. The hero stood nearby and watched the explanations of the two old friends. After this, the keeper invited his ward to go with him. This proposal made the fiery fox very happy because he no longer needed to be alone. But even so, he decided to refuse this generous offer and remain completely where he was. The guardian assumed that he was worried about the rest and restoration, but the fox only slowly raised his head and looked at the night sky. Then he replied that he first needed to restore everything that he had managed to destroy. He said that he could not let the land where the divine beasts live dry up and die. Then he looked at Costa and asked if he had come for his core. The guy tried to deny it at first, but then admitted everything. The fox noticed that his words contradicted each other. Everything was too obvious. He added that, on any other day, with his character, he would have knocked him down and killed him long ago, tearing him in half. But today he helped him, so he forgives him and gives him life. He also noted that even now, the guy is capable of tearing apart a weakened divine beast if he just wishes it. People have an evil nature, so with such power, he would not spare him, even if it cost the fox his life. However, the owner intervened and said that it was he who brought this man here. This is a brave man who will protect the earth and take the place of the guardian. After this, the fox realized that this was the great man about whom the owner had spoken in predictions several thousand years ago. After that, he no longer looked at the person that way. Although he expressed disappointment, the fox noted that he does not believe in a specific person, but in humanity as a whole. Either way, he was going to stay in this place and focus on recovery. Some hostility immediately arose between the fox and our hero, Costa. The guardians returned to. Their earthly appearance promised that even years later, he would definitely return to pick up his comrade. After that, our heroes headed home, leaving the fire beast to rebuild everything it had destroyed. In parting, the keeper added that even if the whole world disappeared at once, he would disappear, preserving the memory of his comrade. He promised that he would never be able to forget him, no matter what happened to them. Ralph was delighted with such words from his master. It gave him true joy. After these words, he gladly allowed our heroes to take the remains of his core. Olga had a hard time getting up because she had to carry a lot of things. Her beloved guide, Daniel, turned around at the girl's words and noticed that it was hard for her. Instantly, he ran up to the girl to help her carry her thing. Olga was upset that the guy was not caring for her enough. It was an ordinary quarrel between two lovers, which happens to everyone. This situation was witnessed by the head of the company where both of them worked. He asked forgiveness for his subordinate because he carried him with him everywhere. However, the girl did not obey the boss at all. On the contrary, she only shouted at him for being so overworked. She demanded a day off for her boyfriend, and also recalled the dangerous performance that time. Everything really worked out with a demonstration of Daniel's strength. His body absorbed the energy and took on its best form. The girl was worried about the fact that in the morning she worked in a restaurant and in the afternoon she disappeared with business at the guild. She demanded a day off, or at least one day when she and Daniel could be together, but he covered her mouth with his hand. Everyone understood that this was not serious at all, so they were not angry. Immediately after this, the driver shouted from the passengers that he needed to leave, so everyone in the group rushed to take their seats. At this time, an abandoned temple stood in the middle of the desert. In its center, there was a dark entrance that allowed one to enter a place never seen before. A small green mouse crept there, unnoticed through a gap in the floor. She quietly watched what was happening inside. This strange green mouse had a small camera on its neck that recorded everything that happened. The werewolf looked at what was in front of his eyes and could not understand what these creatures were up to. Very small people rushed back and forth with tools in their hands. A beautiful, dark-haired, slender woman commanded them menacingly. She was worried that the gate was almost completed, but Pasha had not finished yet. The girl was thinking that everyone was working too slowly. At that moment, someone called her from behind. Another little man with glasses ran up to her and said that the gate ball was completed. Risa looked at the small sphere in his hands and was very happy about it. Then she pulled herself together and praised Pasha for doing such a difficult job. She added later that after this, she simply had to treasure him. This cute boy was incredibly embarrassed by such open praise. Risa did not think that on Earth it would take only 3 months to create a ball, but now she held it in her hands. She added that this was only thanks to such a master as Asha. Thanks to these words, the boy added that in the future, he would be able to make an even more effective device. He said that he understood the essence in general terms, so it would take him about 2 months. However, the girl turned her eyes and said that Pasha, with his abilities, would be enough in a month. The guy was again embarrassed by such praise and promised to try to cope in a month. After that, the girl smiled joyfully and said that this was exactly how she appreciated him. After that, Pasha went back to his laboratory and Risa stood, joyfully waving goodbye to him. She did this until the guy disappeared around the corner, after which the smile disappeared from her face. The girl straightened her hair. She was unhappy that she had to constantly persuade and praise the dwarves so that they would at least do something, although she understood that, for a traitor like her, there was no option to be picky. The girl slowly approached the gate step by step and thought that she would not have another chance. She came close to the stand and realized that even if she had created a gate without the key and battery, she would simply have wasted her energy. She took the ball in her hand and extended it toward this strange installation. She mentally prayed that this would help them achieve what they wanted. As soon as the ball entered the groove, a gate immediately opened in front of the girl. She was incredibly glad that she had managed to do everything right. The girl took the key back and thought that it could be used about 9 more times. She hid the ball in a small bag and secured it to her belt. After that, she turned to someone and ordered them to go out and not crowd in the dark. Immediately after these words, boys and girls began to appear out of nowhere. They looked exactly like Risa, but had different hair and outfits. She told them that she was able to achieve everything only thanks to the dwarves and resources. She also added that they all knew that they had an unenviable position, but today's success should have changed a lot. Her subordinates looked down at the ground. The girl listened carefully to her every word. She stood confidently in front of her followers and talked about their successes. Risa added that today she was more worried than she expected. Her subordinates did not even immediately understand what the girl was talking about. Literally, a second after this, the girl sharply looked up somewhere. She directed the force of her blow to one of the inconspicuous corners in the wall. After that, it was destroyed. The girl discovered a green mouse spy. She was furious that she hadn't noticed him sooner. She used her power again, trying to get the spy, however. Right before her eyes, the green mouse suddenly sparkled brightly. Literally a second later, huge wings appeared. It rushed right next to Risa, hitting her painfully somewhere in the waist area. The girl immediately noticed that this strange green bird had stolen her bag with the ball. The result of their long, painstaking work was stolen by some spy. Risa understood that this could not be allowed at all. She was once again convinced that it was indeed the bag from her belt, after which she ordered to immediately mobilize all forces and find the green eagle. Her subordinates were not supposed to act alone, but to attack in groups. Immediately after this, all the boys and girls gathered here took up arms. They were in excellent physical shape, so they rushed in pursuit of the green bird. This werewolf was in the same group as Dasha, our hero's friend. Although he was unable to gather evidence, the situation was quite serious due to the fact that this group managed to build the gate. They were hunting him, and at that moment, the eagle was only thinking about what catastrophe would happen if all the gates were activated. At the moment when he was already pressed into a corner, the eagle began to shine brightly again. In the next moment, a huge green paw squeezed the guy's throat with one blow. He was slammed against the wall so hard that it left a huge dent. The green hand disappeared, but the white-haired man still could not move after such a blow. The huge animal was now leaning on all its paws and trying to run as far as possible. Due to its size, the gorilla could not be afraid of pursuit but simply threw enemies to the side. Now, all his pursuers were afraid to attack him openly. They tried to avoid a direct confrontation with the same monster. Risa saw the state her warriors were in after meeting this animal. She realized that the gorilla was trying to break through from the outside of the sector. Therefore, the girl summoned a huge black bow with her power. Then she added a black arrow to it, which was created from the same energy. She ordered all her subordinates to gather on the opposite side and block the spy's path. After that, the girl carefully took aim directly at the fleeing creature. She picked the right moment, held her breath for a while, then released the arrow. It rushed straight to its target with lightning speed, hitting the green-furred spy right in the middle of the thigh. Severe, piercing pain made the animal scream sharply. At this time, even more warriors managed to run toward the call of their commander. Risa ordered them to chase the gorilla because with such a wound it could not run far. At this time, the spy hung the ball around his neck and tried to run away with all his might. He already felt that this wound would not go unnoticed by him. He understood that he needed to get out but saw no light anywhere. The wound occupied more and more of his thoughts with each passing second. His leg also gradually ceased to obey him, and his consciousness became clouded. His vision became worse, as if he was about to collapse from fatigue. He tried his best just to get the message to his headquarters. Suddenly, a very bright light appeared right in front of his eyes. For a few seconds, it even caused the werewolf to go blind and lose his orientation. Immediately after this, he realized that he had fallen into a trap that had been prepared for him. Right in front of him, there stood guards with weapons in their hands, guarding the exit. Above them and on the sides were archers who were ready to shoot at any second. And most importantly, the commander of this detachment came out in front of him. Risa stood and looked down at the driven green animal. She only doubted that the spy had nowhere else to run. It seemed to her that now he must give up because there was simply no other way out. To her surprise, the huge gorilla only smiled triumphantly. Instead, the girl did not expect such a reaction at all, so she could not understand what he was going to do. The spy, with the last of his strength, told her that he had not lost yet. After which, the huge green gorilla again glowed with bright light. This time, this transformation quickly caused the entire destroyed temple to shake, because delivering a message to the guild was more important than saving one's own life. Risa stood and looked in front of her, amazed. The cornered animal did not give up. Instead, the beast began to glow with bright green light again, indicating that it was ready to take on a new form. The last transformation was of such incredible proportions that the entire structure began to shake and threatened to collapse. At this time, Costa was somewhere in the middle of the forest and heard a strange sound. The keeper was surprised that the guy was using the brave man's sword to butcher horned pigs. The hero replied that such an artifact of the legendary class cuts like a legendary one. Thanks to the variabilities of this artifact, the hunt was extremely easy and successful. Costa reported that he heard a strange roar of an incomprehensible animal and suggested that the keeper check it out. Balash was not delighted with such an offer, because he had not fully recovered yet, and the hero himself had fallen into this place on the way home. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, he began chopping up the pigs, declaring that they needed to finish them for dinner. However, Costa still suggested going to look at the beast, because fights were the most interesting to watch. The Guardian said nothing but thought that the situation looked too serious to simply be an observer. A huge green tail, all covered with durable scales, whipped from side to side. Instead of a gorilla, a gigantic crocodile appeared in the huge hall. It threw its opponents in different directions, swallowing some. The Dark Elves looked at their enemy and did not dare to attack. They were amazed at how easily their brethren died in battle. Risa was unhappy that her subordinates could not gather their courage. The girl ordered them to immediately restore order in the camp. A squad of archers must keep their distance. Spearmen must stand in a row and prevent the beast from leaving the camp. The crocodile was amazed that just one order from the commander was enough, and the system was already in order. The girl reminded them that the beast could not use its left leg, so she ordered them to attack there and kill it. In any case, they needed to return the gate ball, and she did not care about the fate of the spy himself. Initially, the crocodile planned to take the ball and find out its key properties and deprive them of it. However, he understood that most likely he would not be able to escape with the ball. Therefore, the awakened one threw the bag with his loot as high as possible. Risa was horrified by such careless handling of such a great artifact. The spy only thought that the elves were too skilled at archery, so there was no point in trying to escape by air. He clearly had a new plan in mind, and the commander-in-chief looked at him and waited for the next step. In fact, the beast realized that its only chance to destroy the ball was to swallow it. The crocodile slammed its mouth shut with great force, hoping that the ball would break inside. Risa was horrified that all the work done recently had gone down the drain. The girl literally saw with her own eyes how the ball shattered into small pieces. She stood in the middle of the hall, opposite her almost defeated enemy, and watched how he managed to deceive her. The girl was truly furious that this green beast had managed to so easily destroy their work. The spy had clearly made a huge mistake, as the commander-in-chief was truly furious. In order to somehow implicate the spy, the girl ordered all the archers to aim at him. The crocodile stood silently, completely surrounded on all sides by opponents. At this moment, he was completely prepared for his imminent, inevitable death. Suddenly, a little girl appeared in the man's thoughts, bleeding from her mouth. The man recalled the last minutes of his beloved daughter's life. All he could think about was that he would soon be able to meet his sweet little Anna. However, something clearly went wrong. Instead of being destroyed, the ball began to work. A huge stream of dark energy was released out of the lock, piercing the insides of the huge green crocodile, quickly being absorbed into its insides. The beast, ready to die, suddenly raised its head high, and black smoke poured out to save it. Even Risa did not expect such a reaction, but she noticed that something strange was happening to the spy. The girl ordered all the archers to shoot at the same time. Immediately after her words, more than 100 well-aimed archers lowered their bowstrings. The crocodile was pierced by sharp arrows into literally every part of its body. Suddenly, as if from a crack, a strange, thick smoke began to appear. It was getting closer and closer to the elves, making them worry. Many of them sought help and protection from their commander, Risa. However, only by turning to her did they notice that the girl herself was bleeding. A strange clot of energy, of an incomprehensible color, pierced the girl's body right through. Even one of the Dark Elves could not survive such a wound. While they were worried about their commander-in-chief, dark energy took over the beast's body more and more. The deputy commander was horrified by what was happening and ordered the remaining elves to retreat immediately. All the subordinates immediately rushed away from the scene, saving their lives. This is exactly the picture that our main character, Costa, found when he appeared right above the hole that had formed in the ceiling. The guy had just arrived and was still trying to figure out what was happening here. From the smoke, a huge green leg of a monster appeared, swollen to incredible sizes, and the once green crocodile itself turned into a huge, strange golem. There wasn't a single living soul left. Around him, everyone ran away. One of the elves charged his arrow with dark energy and aimed at the monster. He put a lot of his strength into the last blow, then released the arrow. The elf wanted to avenge his commander-in-chief, who died in this battle. However, this was not destined to happen, because at the last moment the monster felt threatened. It turned towards the shooter, which greatly surprised him. A huge beam of energy was suddenly released from the monster's mouth, moving straight towards the poor shooter's location. The impact was so powerful that it completely destroyed the entire small balcony on which the elf stood. He would most definitely have been dead if his comrade had not pushed him away at the last moment. The comrade reminded the dark elf that their main task was to prevent information from spreading. The commanders would not return, but they had to prevent information leakage and survive. At this moment, the energy began to spread in all directions and strike chaotically. The two elves barely managed to avoid inevitable death and escape deeper into the castle. Our main character calmly watched all this from above. The Guardian even clarified whether Costa was going to capture these dark elves. However, he noticed that the Keeper himself had forbidden him to do this just recently, to which the wolf replied that this does not apply to other races. After all, karma is given in different quantities depending on the reasons and its volume. Costa realized that last time. The Guardian stopped him because, having harmed a person, he could not become a protector god due to changed karma. The guy also thought that the Dark Elves had the same laws of the world. They value the lives of their relatives and should not kill each other. However, judging by their last reaction to events, the guy was wrong. The Guardian noted that no creature deserves to die. However, the living cannot always avoid conflicts, and this is understandable. Moreover, these Dark Elves are unlikely to benefit people, which is why he asked Costa as a person. The hero replied that the Guardian too often asks questions that confuse him. The wolf noticed that the guy was too hostile. He may not want to become a protector god, but even so, such statements and actions only prove his immaturity. The hero was irritated by the gap between them, which was always felt at such moments. The guy spread his hands and said that he partially agreed with the words of the Keeper. However, his main goal now is to save Dash's colleague from a scrape. The guy did not hide the fact that the Dark Elves also bothered him. However, at the moment, what interested him most was the black demonic energy. After all, at the moment it was very similar to what had recently been hiding in the fiery fox. Costa was simply interested in what kind of lousy demon was plotting these intrigues. It was unlikely that this was the work of the Dark Elves. In any case, the hero needed to save the man, so he jumped down.
The guy carefully landed right in front of the huge green monster. It just noticed him and slowly turned towards the new enemy. Costa was not at all afraid of his enemy. Turning to Dash's colleague locked inside, the guy called upon his powers. In the palm of his hand, he promised to free the man soon. Thanks to his abilities, small and large stones began to rise from the ground. More and more of them rose into the air, glowing with a yellow flame. Gradually, the stones began to twist in a spiral, as if they were in a whirlpool. From such a strain of magical power, even our hero's eyes turned blue.
Immediately after this, Costa directed this entire gigantic flow of energy, along with the stones, forward. His improvised weapon came closer and closer to the monster surrounding it. But the monster did not think of giving up quickly and again released a clot of energy from its mouth. The monster aimed right at the middle of the stream, intending to reach the enemy. However, his path was blocked by sand and stones that blocked his view. Now he stood completely inside this vortex and looked around.